Search for Common Ground's 2021 Common Ground Awards, the virtual experience with Tim Pogo and Diana Santos.
Hi everyone, welcome to the virtual experience of the 2021 Common Ground Awards. I'm Tim Pogo, joined by Diana Santos. We're in Midtown Manhattan at the Chelsea Glass House, the amazing venue for tonight's awards. Diana, how cool is this?
This is super cool. This happens every year, but this time we're back and we're really, really excited.
Yeah, and we couldn't be in a better place too. I mean, we are literally in the middle of it all. There's cabs going, there's construction going on. Like, we are in the heart of New York City, and it kind of makes sense to kind of come back and bring the awards here, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, we're really excited to see the stories, excited to hear everything that we're going to talk about Common Ground.
Give us some background of these awards.
Yeah, so the awards have been happening for about 23 years now. It started in 1989. Happens every year. Last year, because of COVID, we had to take a pause. But yeah, like I said, we're back. We really try to highlight so many stories that have to do with Common Ground, from our programs to stories that happen in the news, to stories that happen worldwide, to congressmen, just anything and anyone that has to do with Common Ground, that has practiced Common Ground in their lives. That's what we really focus on in these awards.
And the awards are presented by Search for Common Ground. And for anybody not familiar, maybe watching, give us some background on you guys.
Yeah, Search for Common Ground is the largest peacebuilding organization in the world. We have worked in over 30 plus countries for 40 years. Next year is our anniversary, our 40th anniversary. So we're really, really excited. And our big thing is the Common Ground approach.
Which is what?
The Common Ground approach is all about finding common ground with someone who is completely different from you, someone you would never think to work with. But it's all about kind of finding common ground, finding trust, building collaboration, and just having transformative conversations with one another.
And really, it sounds complicated at first, but those are just three easy core values, right? And it brings it all together?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not going to lie, common ground is difficult. Finding common ground is not easy, but it's also not impossible.
Exactly. You work with Search for Common Ground, so talk about your experiences there. Like, what led you to this kind of work?
Yeah. So I've worked at Search for Common Ground for about 3 years now. I am part of the comms team here. And what led me here is, my parents came from Civil War, El Salvador, so it's very personal to me. Conflict is very personal to me. Violence is very personal to me. But I think what's so wonderful about Search for Common Ground is that everyone who works there, conflict is personal to them. And I think conflict is universal. It's inevitable, right? In every relationship that we have, whether it's interpersonal or community-wide or worldwide, right? We see with wars happening all the time. It's inevitable, but also it doesn't have to lead to violence.
So it's one thing to just have a job and go to work and do your thing, but each one of you is really invested in this work, aren't you?
Yeah, it's great. I love it.
So describe some of your favorite things about working at Search and some things that you maybe learned.
Some things that I've learned personally from my own life is that no one is too different that you can't find common ground with them. Even in my own life with activism, with my personal activism, common ground activism is something that we've adopted at our organization and something that we want to make more accessible to other activists. Knowing that you don't have to label someone as the enemy. You can work together actually to find solutions together. Because we're all human, we all have the same basic needs. We all want to feel safe. We all want to feel seen. We all want to feel heard. And that's just basic. And I think if you can see that in the other person, they can see that in you, no matter how different they are. I think we can really transform the world together.
It's amazing. Yeah. And these are the stories that we're going to be hearing tonight, which I can't wait for.
Yeah. And Tim, what does common ground mean to you?
I got to say, before I got here, if you asked me this 2 days ago, I probably would have had a different answer, because I would have thought it was, when like negotiations, where two sides have to say, like, okay, well, I'll give up this thing if you give up that thing, right, and you give me this, and I always thought it was like a give and take. And now I'm learning that really common ground is not that at all, is it?
Not at all. It is not a win-lose situation. It's a win-win.
Perfect. We should probably go inside. Let's check out the space. Let's see where the awards will happen tonight. And besides, I think the construction folks need their space back, so let's go inside. Now we're on the 14th floor. This is going to be where the awards presentation will be. It's still getting built, but this is going to be the spot, right?
Yeah, not much to see right now, but tonight you'll definitely see what's going on.
So as we get set up, and later tonight, this is the spot where people come up and receive their much-deserved awards. Who are some of the people in years past who have won these awards?
Yeah, so in years past, we've had people like Muhammad Ali, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Ed Norton. If you know Fight Club, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Oh, yeah, we've had very prominent figures come up here. Congressman John Lewis and Elwyn Wilson. Just incredible stories, incredible people, again, looking for common ground.
And each one of these people has, like, not just something that they've done, but also their own story, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's, again, personal to them. Conflict is a personal thing. And these are stories that highlight that it is possible to find common ground.
Excellent. Let's head upstairs and figure out where our home base is going to be, okay?
Yeah, let's go.
We're up on the 21st floor now of Glass House, where the live virtual part of the experience will happen tonight. And we're lucky enough to bump into this man, the busiest person here today. Shamal Idris, the CEO of Search for Common Ground. You're kind of doing everything. You got meetings going on. You're helping stuff goodie bags.
No, it's the best night of the year for me, so I love it. I'm not the busiest one, though. They all are, so
okay.
got to give them the credit.
Talk about these awards. Like, what are you most excited about tonight?
I mean, one of the reasons that this is so exciting is that we celebrate people from all walks of life, all cultures and backgrounds who are achieving huge breakthroughs in peace building. And so there's nothing more satisfying than recognizing people who really deserve to be recognized. So I just love that. And I'm looking forward to every one of the awards tonight.
And talk about this space. I mean, is this cool or what, right?
It's a great space.
Yeah, it's expansive. I love it. I went out onto the balcony and got a little bit, I'm not that scared of heights, but I didn't want to go too close to the edge, but it's beautiful inside.
It's going to be great, and even better tonight, too. Now, Search for Common Ground has been around for nearly 40 years, and for, almost like over half that, you've had these awards. So where did that initial idea come from to present awards each year?
Well, I think one of the hardest things when you're trying to drive change is if people don't even think it's possible, right? So, and people, especially when they get caught up in conflict, they sometimes think that building trust or generating collaboration across divides, let alone achieving big breakthroughs, that's not even possible. And so one of the best ways to say, no, it actually is possible, is to recognize the fact that it's happening all the time. And that not only that, but people from all different walks of life can make it happen. And so we started these awards really as a way of sort of elevating that possibility in people's minds. We're not just talking about something that we want to create, people are doing it every day. And that really has helped, I think, give people a vision of what it is that we're trying to do in the world.
Has there ever been people you've given awards to over the years that, if you rewind a couple years back, several years back, you never ever would have thought there would have been some common ground between people?
Most of the awards. I mean, honestly, and that's part of the thing. I remember one of my favorite years was when we gave an award to, so we had both Muhammad Ali and we had these two leaders of rival gangs in Washington, D.C. that got awards that night. And we made sure that we could also get them on stage together. So these are two rival gang members in the city of Washington, D.C. who had forged a truce that had stood for 10 years. And we wanted to recognize them. And I think we did that one at the Austrian embassy, right, in D.C. So to have these rival gang members in the Austrian embassy and to see how awed they were and honored they were to be on the same stage with Ali. And of course, he was brilliant with them, as he was with everybody. And so if you rewound 10 years ago, people would have thought, that's impossible. These gangs have been fighting forever. It's never going to happen. And you could look at many of the awards, if not most of them, and if you go rewind to before they achieved the breakthrough they had, most people would tell them it's impossible.
And Shamal, this year's awards are all about celebrating common ground in the U.S. What would you tell people out there right now that don't believe that that's possible?
Watch the awards, because you're going to see some. Really, you're going to see examples. And I think, as one of the challenges we had is that we were spoiled for choice in terms of who to talk about tonight. So, the last award of the night.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we thank you
Plessy
all
and
for
Ferguson,
joining us.
For Americans who are concerned about the divisions in
We
this
ask
country,
you to
those
please
names will
find your
ring very
seat so
true.
that
Plessy Ferguson is the infamous Supreme Court case that codified racial segregation laws in the Jim Crow era of legislation in this country. And so to see that Phoebe Ferguson and Keith Plessy now formed a friendship, that they've actually been fostering all kinds of awareness and trust building across racial dividing lines. And they just achieved a big breakthrough last week when the Louisiana Board of Paroles unanimously called for the posthumous pardoning of Plessy. It's a great story, but there are a lot of stories like that out there. And unfortunately, in our media space and even most of our social media networks right now, those stories don't tend to make it through the filter bubbles. So we're all sort of being conditioned in some ways to think that this is impossible, that there's no reaching across dividing lines, when in fact in the real world, it's happening a lot. And so my hope is that people might get some inspiration from that, and it'll encourage others to keep doing the same work.
And that's something I find amazing too. Like you mentioned that story at the Austrian embassy. Here's these two rival gang members found this common thing in being a fan of or in awe of Muhammad Ali. Have you found that it's almost surprising some of the things? Maybe it's a favorite food or music. I don't know, like everyday things. Is it these are the things that people find the common ground on?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with common ground is that it's both always there and it can always be created, right? So oftentimes when we're entering any community, you look at how people build peace in any society. They've got to start where there's some common ground, and sometimes it's a common food. I can't tell you how many soccer tournaments our teams around the world have organized because it's the only thing that will get the police and youth groups doing something together. But then once you start on that basis, it doesn't just end there. That's just a starting point. And what happens when people start to build trust is they discover and they're willing to explore whole new areas of common ground that nobody would have thought possible just a week earlier, right? And so common ground is both sort of there for all of us to find and build on. And then the nice thing about it is that once we start building it, it's very dynamic. It grows into unexpected directions.
We know you got to run. You got 8 more million things to do today. So thanks for taking a couple minutes, though. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to everybody out there for joining us. It's going to be a great night.
All right, Diana, I think we're ready to go.
Yeah, we're ready.
I'm excited. First of all, I want to thank all of you out there participating in the virtual experience. And here's how it's going to work. All of you out there watching via Zoom, we want your questions. So we're going to be chatting with a lot of the award winners. So as you see the action unfold and the awards being presented, go ahead, type in your questions in the Zoom chat, and Diana and I will read them live a little bit later on in the show.
Yeah, and we also want to thank our staff that's joining us live right now, our staff that's here, and everyone that's making this night happen.
And what can we look forward to here in this first portion of the awards?
Well, in this first portion, we're going to see our program awards. We're going to see the highlighting of common ground from our country offices from Mali to Sri Lanka to Lebanon. We're going to see the power of youth, the power of media, and the power of reintegration into society.
So basically a trip around the world in the next 45 or so minutes, right?
Basically, and all from the comfort of your house.
Yeah, exactly. So we will join you a little bit later on, back up here on the 21st floor with some interviews. In the meantime, let's take it to the podium and Jeremy Diamond from CNN.
Do you ever stop to wonder, of all the worlds that humans could have created, how did we end up with this one? This land of barbed wire, these cities of rubble, the deep political divides and deeper personal pain. The answer, in short, is violence. Violence that rips apart lives and communities, leaving suffering in its wake. Violence is a choice, and choices are not destiny. We are Search for Common Ground, the world's largest peacebuilding organization. Over 1,000 people spread across 4 continents, working on the front lines of violent conflict to turn suspicion and fear into community. We start with the truth that common ground is not the middle. It does not ask you to compromise your values or shed your beliefs. Common ground means meeting someone where they are, understanding the deep fears and hopes that drive them, and shifting people so that they are seated on the same side of the table, facing a shared problem together, not as enemies. From Yemen to the US, we use common ground to mend what is broken, finding creative ways to reach millions of people, shifting attitudes and then institutions so that change lasts. We are peace builders, staring violence in the face, standing without fear, bold in our dreams, bolder in our action. Leaders who listen, listeners who lead, healthy community across divides. This is the future that we are building, a future that we celebrate tonight. Welcome to the 2021 Common Ground Awards.
Please welcome to the stage the president of Search for Common Ground, Issam Ghanem.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to see you here. My name is Issam Ghanem. I am the president of Search for Common Ground. I invite you to dream for a moment. Imagine a world where respect and dignity are the habits of the majority and the experience of the minorities. Imagine a world where people everywhere think of their differences as opportunities to learn and grow closer to each other. Imagine a world of peace, justice, and prosperity, where people respond to their differences with collaboration rather than destruction. This world where children are safe, educated, and healthy, the environment is protected, and violence is only a memory, is attainable. But it's only attainable when we shield ourselves as human beings from the forces that work to keep people apart. I grew up in Sudan, where the quest for justice and peace has been the mission of the masses of the population for decades, but unfortunately not the interest of very few who happen to have uniforms and guns. After that, I worked in almost responding to all the humanitarian crises and conflict that plagued the world for the past 3 decades. And I saw and I witnessed the best of human behavior and the worst of human behavior. I saw how the greed for wealth, political and economic dominance creates and sustains human tragedy. And I saw how such tragedy always predictable and preventable. As Americans, some of us think of violent conflict as something that happens somewhere away, far away, not here. But I am sure I am not alone when I say that the bitterness and acrimony of the last few years have changed that perception. As a country, we are divided as ever since the Civil War. There is widespread cynicism about our ability to overcome our political, racial, and religious divisions, and some concerns about whether we have the ability to build a more peaceful, just, and equitable society. We are impacted every day with the trust deficit that underpins almost all the political actions today. We at Search for Common Ground, one of the oldest and largest dedicated peacebuilding organizations in the world, have been on the front lines of violent conflict for over 4 decades, from Yemen to Burundi to Myanmar. We know the early signs of violent conflict, and we agree that many of them are present in today's America. This is the time to act. But we also reject the pessimistic view that our differences are too deep to overcome, or the barriers between us too tall to climb. Indeed, we know that there is hope, the hope of common ground. It is in our name, it is what we do. And we help divided people learn to trust each other, collaborate with each other, and create opportunities for a breakthrough for peace, a peace that works for all and everyone. Tonight, we will get a flavor of what we do and see that common ground can be found in societies that are far divided than ours. And we also hear about a new initiative, Common Ground USA, an exciting program to tackle conflict here at home in the United States. But before we do that, let us start the night in a place of gratitude. I am grateful for the staff for creating this opportunity for us to gather here and virtually tonight to share the journey together. I am grateful to all of you, our guests and supporters, for joining us and helping shape our reality and dreams, in spite of a pandemic that is still disrupting all our lives. We can't do it without you. I'm grateful to every single person you will see on stage today or on the screen for being a leader in making that world a peaceful place. Most of all, I'm very grateful for Search for Common Ground's global community of peace builders in over 30 countries. Because of COVID-19, their work has been exceedingly difficult this year. The resilience, adaptability, creativity, and courage they are able to display, and the breakthrough they continue to make, fill my heart with gratitude for being part of this organization. And I really appreciate all of your support. So without any further delay, let me welcome to the stage our MC for tonight, Jeremy Diamond.
Search for Common Ground's 2021 Common Ground Awards. Our MC knows all the right questions to ask,
especially when it comes to the White House.
Please welcome on stage CNN's Jeremy Diamond.
To start things off. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Common Ground Awards. My name is Jeremy Diamond, and I'm a CNN White House correspondent. When Search for Common Ground reached out and asked me if I'd serve as tonight's MC, my first thought was, are you sure? In today's climate, it seems journalists are rarely viewed as unifying figures. But then I looked at my mentions on Twitter, and what do I see? Common ground. People on the left and the right coming together to criticize me. Sometimes it's even over the same report. What can I say? I'm happy to do my part to bring the country together. All kidding aside, I've spent most of my career covering the deepening political polarization in this country and the ways in which the words of the President of the United States can either inflame or calm those divisions. That's why I'm honored to be here to mark the theme of this year's awards, Celebrating Common Ground in the USA, an opportunity to honor Search for Common Ground's work around the world and demonstrate the potential of its new initiative, Common Ground USA. This new initiative is organized around 3 pillars: preventing political violence, fostering a healthier media ecosystem, and mobilizing youth activism. Through each pillar, Common Ground USA will leverage the organization's decades of experience tackling the world's most difficult and consequential conflicts to transform conflicts here in the US, from radicalization to the hyper-polarized media. The next three award recipients vividly illustrate Search's vital work in practice.
Search for Common Ground's 2021 Common Ground Awards.
The Common Ground Award for Preventing Political Violence.
In recognition of peace builders who are preventing radicalization,
Diffusing violence,
and building unlikely alliances for peace.
And I believe now we're going to call up Raja Abinader. Is he here? There we go.
Good evening, everybody, and what an honor to be here among you tonight. I am Judge Raja Abinader, head of the Prisons Directorate at the Lebanese Ministry of Justice. I have been focusing on prison reform for almost a decade now. During all these years, there were obviously happy moments, a few sad ones, some successes, and quite a few failures. But there was also the thrill of actually making a difference, even if it's a small one. There was the drive to be an agent of change. The work has instilled in me 4 beliefs. 1, there is nothing more sacred to a person than it's his freedom, his liberty, and his right to live in dignity. 2nd, any of us, anywhere, at any time, and for any reason, justified or not, can, at some point, violate social norms and become an inmate. Being in prison should never be the end of someone's story. It should always be a phase, and most certainly a new beginning. 3, the ultimate goal of any criminal justice system, anywhere in the world, is to protect society through the rehabilitation of inmates and their reintegration into the community. It certainly is not to simply put people away. Finally, I also realized that this is very hard and unrecognized work. Corrections professionals are tasked with the most difficult and unsung responsibilities within the public service. To put it in simpler terms, I have often felt like I'm using a tiny spoon to move a gigantic mountain of sand, only to discover that somebody is actually pouring more sand at the top of it as I'm trying to move it. This is precisely where Search for Common Ground came in. The team in Lebanon, which I know personally, they knew what should be done, with whom, and the right way to do it. They had the expertise, but they also had the passion. Most importantly, they offered to help me move the mountain of sand with a much bigger spoon. Search has done incredible work over the years in Lebanon. From building common ground between Syrian refugees and Lebanese communities, to helping youth on the path to radicalization, communities all across the country have felt the positive impact of Search's work. The program we are celebrating tonight is actually changing the correctional system for the better. You see, in Lebanon, many inmates, just like here in the States, get out of prison only to return shortly after. They are made free, but they have no opportunities ahead of them. They can't get employed, they can't rent a place. Often, without any other choice, they relapse into crime, or even sometimes radicalization, or violent extremism and political violence. In the video we just saw, you talked about Search staring violence in the face. This is something that we do every day in Lebanon. We stare violence in the face. Search is finally changing this equation. This initiative is involving everyone in the Lebanese correctional system: inmates, security guards, and institutional actors like myself. Search is training guards and inmates to improve the protection of human rights in Lebanese prisons. They are reintegrating former inmates through vocational training and conflict transformation training to steer them away from more violence or extremism. Search in Lebanon is shifting public opinion towards inmates through films and campaigns. I consider myself privileged to be one of Search for Common Ground's partners in Lebanon. Working with you guys has been and still is the true reward for me. It has been a genuine learning and sharing journey. It has given me a concrete opportunity to give back to my community and to help protect it, especially during these most challenging times that my country is going through. When anybody asks me, what is your strongest asset? I just smile and I tell him, I'm Lebanese. Thank you for this much appreciated recognition. It is with great honor that I humbly accept this award, knowing that the person you will see on screen next should be standing here in my place. He is the one who deserves the true award. His name is Ahmad. He is a former prisoner and a protagonist of Search's documentary about this initiative called Second Wind. You will see a trailer for it in a moment. Ahmad is fighting against all odds to earn once more his place within the community, while I am just a civil servant doing his job. Thank you, everyone.
طلعت من الحبس ما قعدت برا بالحرية 15 يوم، وحتى ما حسيت بفرحة الحرية. يعني أنا محبوس 3 سنين، طلعت لبرا لازم أكون حس بسعادة بفرح إنه أنا طلعت. بحكيك إياها صدقاً، تمنيت إنه لو بقيت جوا. قديه هي الحرية حلوة، لأنه أنا عارفين حالي جوا بعدني محمي من اللي رح يصير معي برا، لأنه عارفين حالي طالع على المجهول. بالفيلم بقول لو بقيت بالحبس أأمن من إني أطلع لبرا، لأنه برا ناطرني المجهول. لما طلعت لبرا طلعت أنا خايفان من شي منه موجود، لأنه ما في شي مجهول والحياة كتير حلوة. أنا فت على مركز نصراته لما طلعت من الحبس. فت على المركز لحتى أتخلص من سلوكيات إدمان وسلوكيات تعلمتها بالحبس ونمط حياة كنت عايش وما كان مزبوط. بمركز نصراته لقيت الرعاية والاهتمام، ولقيت أشخاص إني بيقدروا يكونوا عم بيساعدوني وعم بيشتغلوا علي. بلشوا شوي يقعدوني مع معالجين نفسيين، أخصائيين اجتماعيين ويشتغلوا علي. شافوا وين نقاط ضعفي وين نقاط قوتي واشتغلوا علي وطوروها. بعد فترة 7-8 أشهر بالمركز تعرفنا على منظمة اسمها سيرش، واجت واشتغلت مع المركز اللي أنا فيه، وصاروا يتعاونوا مع بعض وعندهم أفكار حلوة. عملونا أكثر من بروجرام، أول بروجرام كان عن كيفية حل النزاعات بطريقة مش عنيفة. بروجرام استفدت منه كتير وعلمني إنه بالحياة بتقدر تكون عم تحل مشاكلك ونزاعاتك بطريقة دبلوماسية وما فيها أي مشاكل. كمان أخذت صف كمبيوتر، والشغلة والأهم من هيك تعلمت مصلحة. مركز نصرته كان عم يفتح معمل للمواد التنظيف، وسيرج تعرفت على المركز بنص المشوار، فقرروا مع بعض يكفوا. هذا المعمل مميزته إنه الشخص بيقدر يتوظف فيه بدون سجل عدلي، وأنتم بتعرفوا نحن كسجناء سابقين طالعين من الحبس سجلاتنا بتكون وسخة. كمان هذا المعمل كان عم بيأمنني مدخول لحتى أكون عم بصرف لحالي وما أنجرب غلط وما واجه صعوبات توصلني على الحبس. تقريبا بعد سنة طلعت من المركز. أنا هلأ صار لي 4 أشهر طالع من المركز. حياتي كتير حلوة، بشتغل وبنتج وبصرف وبطلع مصاري. اكتشفت إنه أنا كنت مربط حالي بقيود وجنازير وأفكار سوداء ما موجودة. وغير هيك كمان كنت مبعد عن حال الأشخاص اللي هن بيوجهوني صح واللي بيكونوا حد واللي بيساعدوني هن نصرته وسيرج. في مثل حابب أقول لكم إياه: السفن ما انعملت لتنحط على الشط، السفن انعملت لحتى تواجه الخطر والأمواج. وأنا هيدي القاعدة ماشي عليها وعم بنجح بكل المطالب. شكرا سيرج.
Such inspiring stories. After 4 years covering the Trump administration, I can tell you that I am no stranger to the fight against misinformation and the importance of shared facts. The next award is about an incredible group of people in Sri Lanka who have been combating online misinformation, fake news, and radicalization on social media. We made every effort to have these awardees join us here tonight, but COVID travel restrictions made that impossible. However, they graciously shared their stories with us on video. I'm honored to introduce the Common Ground Award for Inspiring Media for Social Change, recognizing Sri Lanka's cyber guardians. Please take a look.
Search for Common Ground's 2021 Common Ground Awards.
The Common Ground Award for mobilizing a healthier media ecosystem,
Honoring activists who create media that connects us
rather than divides us.
Hello everyone, I'm Kritika Turiraja, the current team lead for digital peacebuilding at Search Sri Lanka. Being a cis female lesbian from Sri Lanka's northern region of Jaffna, hate speech and bullying hit close to home. I am a minority within minorities, a Tamil, Hindu, a lesbian, and a cis female. I have experienced domestic violence and hate speech based on my identity and body image from my parents, my teachers, my peers and friends. And this is why I began working with youth and children in Sri Lanka. These issues are very personal to me. So when I learned about Search for Common Ground initiatives on digital peace building, I immediately wanted to get involved. Working in the human rights field for more than 12 years, I know the importance of building the trust and collaboration that create breakthroughs for peace. The civil war in Sri Lanka ended in 2009, as you all know, but the scars still remain. Over the past decades, my country has gone through cycles of violence generated by the same deep ethnic and religious divisions. You might remember the Easter attacks in 2019. COVID-19 exacerbated these divisions. Discrimination and stigma against minorities have increased as a result of vigorous online hate speech campaigns. And these hate speech campaigns are carried out by extremist groups. And especially gender-based hate speech is also rampant with the bullying and vilification of women and people from the LGBTIQ+ community. And that's why Search Sri Lanka's work is very important for all of us. Through initiatives like the Cyber Guardians, Women in Technology, and the We Lanka Project, we have enabled young people from all over the country in Sri Lanka to identify hate speech and also to develop positive digital content. The youth learned about the harmful effects of online hate speech from various experts in cybersecurity, digital marketing, SEO, and social media. They picked up storytelling, video, and photography skills from experienced mentors to produce positive content that advances peace and reconciliation in Sri Lanka. We designed our projects to enable young people to challenge negative stereotypes towards minorities and also to fight back against hate speech. We also established a pool of vibrant digital heroes who will continue to lead their peers on the path. This initiative has reached more than 7 million people, 1 in 3 Sri Lankans. It continues to gain traction day by day. But we are under no illusions that our work is done. There's so much to be done. And I'm so glad to introduce Nimes Ravanage, who will be receiving the Common Ground Award for Media on behalf of the digital heroes, cyber guardians, and all other young people countering hate speech online in Sri Lanka. Nimesh is a social media analyst and one of our mentors to the cyber guardians. He is currently reading for his master's in international business studies in the UK. But he was in Sri Lanka in 2019. He was leading an early response to the Easter bombings. Like me, his commitment to peace comes from his personal experience, and I invite him to share his story. Thank you.
During my childhood, the violence was terrifying. I was afraid to go to school. It is a feeling no kid should ever have. I had to face 3 suicide bombings. I remember being 8 or 9, traveling in the bus with my mother. When there were loud sounds, I got terrified thinking it was a bomb. It was really shocking and I don't want anyone to feel that again. When the Easter Sunday attacks happened, I had returned home from my night shift. 10 minutes later, I got a call informing me of the bombings. I couldn't believe it. Within a few hours of the attack, fake news and hate speech targeting a certain ethnicity were everywhere on social media. We had a messenger group for cyber guardians. The social media influencers on the group asked me what we could do to stop this. They were thinking what I was thinking. We wanted to do something because we understood how dangerous the situation was. As the dust was settling and Sri Lanka was recovering from the shock of the attack, these social media influencers set aside their own emotions and started to counter hate speech. We worked around the clock. With the support of Search Sri Lanka, we create content that would unify the country around shared grief and hope. We also reported harmful content online to Facebook. We were asked to report any news of further attacks to the authorities so that they would prevent ethnic clashes. It took very little to incite real-world violence. So much so that the government resorted to banning social media briefly after the Easter attacks. But the misinformation continued. A minister of the opposition appeared on national television and claimed with his hands on his heart that 11 army soldiers had died when infiltrating a terrorist cell in eastern Sri Lanka. The truth was that no soldiers had died. We had to do something to counter this rumor quickly. In this volatile situation, I coordinated the responses of 15 young people who were able to avoid the potential tragic consequences of this dangerous statement. I'm honored to have acted as a bridge between Search Sri Lanka and the youth. For them, this was a baptism of fire out of which true guardians of Sri Lanka's cyberspace were born. In a landscape where young people are often the targets of online hate, Search Sri Lanka has worked closely with over 600 youth from all parts of the country and enabled them to effectively counter hate speech and misinformation. Content generated by this group, along with the search visibility campaigns, has reached over 7 million people, a third of the country's population. On behalf of all the digital heroes and sheroes campaigning a better internet in Sri Lanka, I would like to thank you for this recognition. It is an honor for all of us to be receiving this award. Thank you.
Search for Common Ground's 2021 Common Ground Awards.
The Common Ground Award for mobilizing youth activism.
In recognition of young changemakers
who are standing up to violence
and leading movements for peace.
My name is Oriane. I'm a communication specialist for Search in West Africa. During my time with Search, I worked all over the region. But two of my most powerful memories are with two night awardees, two young journalists from Mali whose names are Ambroise and Bintou. It was my last day in the capital, Bamako, when heavy rain started to pour over the city. Streets were flooded, and getting anywhere became incredibly difficult. Yet, Ambroise didn't meet his appointment with me. He arrived, completely soaked, on the back of a motorcycle cab, and his first words were, "I had to come. I had to tell you my story." In a moment, you'll hear why from Ambroise himself. Then, our other awardee, Bintou, a 15-year-old albino girl who told me, "I was born with less melanin, but I'm a child, like any other." Watching her hosting a radio show, it was impossible not to notice her presence and charisma. At such a young age, Bintou has made it her mission to become the voice of the voiceless, defending the rights of vulnerable children, especially those with albinism. Bintou and Ambroise are part of our Youth Talk project. This is an initiative that's creating a new generation of young journalists in Mali, South Sudan, and the Central African Republic. Search equips these children with skills to report on local conflict issues and create radio programs that help people find common ground. Over the decades, we have done similar things in other parts of the world, from Sierra Leone to Burundi, and the children we trained there ended up becoming nationally recognized investigative journalists. Leaders like former Liberian President Sirleaf and US ambassadors have credited our radio programs for preventing mass atrocities and genocide, uniting world nations around a common purpose instead. That's why Youth Talk holds so much promise, and I cannot wait to see what's ahead for the children involved in it. These kids that I met in Bamako are exceptional. Some have experienced the tragedy of war, and they draw on their unique stories to tackle the toughest issues in their communities. Things like forced marriage, violence against minorities, and the impact of war on their education. But they don't stop at reporting. They work to find solutions to these problems, uniting their voice for the common good. These are not just children who learn new skills. They have something powerful to say, and finally found a national platform to be heard. A space to give shape to their dreams of building a safer, more just country. As they walk the streets of Bamako, Ambroise, Bintou, and their peers lend a microphone to street children, to women, to the elderly or the disabled. They show the elders that young people have the power to change things for the better. They are shifting the way youth are seen in a society that often casts them aside. But let me stop here and let's watch Bintou in action and hear directly from her and Ambroise.
Quand on a une situation d'handicap ici au Mali, nous sommes victimes de plusieurs choses. Discrimination, assassinat même. C'est important pour moi de parler aux jeunes marginalisés. Ces jeunes-là, ils vivent, mais ils croient que leur existence même n'est pas garantie. S'il n'y a personne pour leur parler, il n'y a personne pour leur dire que voilà, ton handicap, c'est pas de ta faute et tout. Ça sera autre chose. La vie n'est vraiment pas facile quand on a une dans une société comme la nôtre. quand ils me verront derrière le micro en train d'animer une émission, ils vont se dire, ah, celle aussi, elle est albinos. Mais pourtant, elle est derrière le micro, elle anime une émission et puis elle présente une émission seule. Ça leur redonnera confiance en eux et ça leur ouvrira les yeux que les albinos aussi ont certains droits, ont le droit de vivre et le droit de faire ce que tout le monde fait.
Bonjour à tous, je m'appelle Ambroise, j'ai 15 ans.
Et bonjour à tous, je m'appelle Bintou, j'ai aussi 15 ans. Nous sommes désolés de ne pas pouvoir être physiquement avec vous ce soir, mais nous voulons quand même vous en dire un peu plus sur nous.
Je vais commencer par revenir un peu en arrière. Je vivais dans le nord du Mali lorsque la guerre a commencé. J'avais 8 ans à l'époque. J'étais traumatisé, je ne parlais plus et ne sortais plus. Lorsque j'ai fui avec ma famille, mon père, un militaire, n'a eu d'autre choix que de rester sur place. Pendant des mois, nous n'avons eu aucune nouvelle, pensant qu'il avait été tué. Heureusement, ce n'était pas le cas. Lorsque nous avons tous été réunis, nous avons déménagé dans le centre du Mali, à Mopti, où j'ai rejoint Cherche pour la première fois, en tant que jeune journaliste. Mais cette région était aussi en guerre. J'étais coincé dans une boucle de traumatisme qui m'empêchait de m'ouvrir aux autres. Lorsque nous nous sommes finalement installés à Bamako, la capitale, l'équipe de Cherche a pensé à moi pour le projet Parlons Jeunesse. Ils m'ont demandé de participer en tant que jeune journaliste, ce qui m'a permis de m'ouvrir enfin. C'est la raison pour laquelle je suis encore là. Cette expérience m'a donné l'envie d'aider d'autres jeunes traumatisés par la guerre à trouver leur voie. Maintenant, parlons un peu plus de toi, Bintou.
Merci Ambroise. Bien que mon histoire soit très différente, avant le projet Loucheur, j'étais moi aussi timide et renfermée. Je savais ce que cela signifiait d'être albinos au Mali. On peut même être tué pour cela. Je n'osais donc pas sortir et m'exprimer. Je n'avais pas d'amis. Nous, les enfants albinos, avons peur, mais nos familles aussi. Ça nous empêche souvent de quitter la maison à cause de ce qui pourrait nous arriver. Le projet du Search a fait une différence pour moi et pour d'autres enfants qui sont confrontés à la violence à cause de la couleur de leur peau. Maintenant, lorsque d'autres enfants albinos me voient animer une émission de radio, ils sont encouragés à sortir de leur coquille. Ce projet a changé ma vie. Dès la première émission, j'ai senti ma peur disparaître. Je suis fière d'être une voix pour l'égalité des albinos au Mali. Cette peau blanche n'est pas un handicap. Je souhaite que de plus en plus d'enfants albinos réalisent qu'ils ont le droit d'être aimés comme tout le monde. Et toi, Ambroise, qu'est-ce qui te donne de l'espoir?
Ce qui me donne de l'espoir, c'est notre génération. Même les jeunes enfants ont quelque chose d'important à dire. Cela me donne de l'espoir pour l'avenir du pays. Je suis reconnaissant que le projet de Cherche promeuve notre droit à nous exprimer. Alors merci, merci et encore merci pour ce prix. Il m'encourage à réaliser mon rêve de faire du Mali un pays en paix.
Oui, merci pour ce prix. Il m'encourage à défendre les droits des personnes handicapées et ceux qui se sentent marginalisés. Cela signifie beaucoup pour moi. Merci, Omiti.
This next award has never been given before, a one-of-a-kind award for a one-of-a-kind person. To present the Common Ground Award for Uncommon Generosity, please welcome Search for Common Ground CEO, Shamal Idris.
Good evening. It's great to see you all. I'm sure that in the history of every great enterprise, there are pivotal moments, sort of forks in the road where things could go one direction or the other. For us at Search for Common Ground, that pivotal moment came 6 years ago, shortly after I took my current position there. The challenges facing the organization at that time were too large and complex for any rational person to think that we would have made them through. And I can say that openly now only because in such a public forum, those days are so far and firmly behind us. Many of the people who enabled us to put those days behind us are in this room or watching us virtually tonight. But nobody is more responsible, or do I feel more gratitude to, for what they did at that time than the awardee for tonight's Uncommon Generosity Award, Lori Michaels. Lori leveraged everything from her networks to the resources at her disposal to her uncommonly frank and direct feedback to me as the CEO of the organization, which continues to this day, and an extraordinary humility. I'm quite sure when I'm finished talking, somebody will have to literally carry Lori up onto this stage to accept any public recognition, but we're going to force her to come up anyway. Lori will tell you, I don't know anyone. And I'll be sitting with her at the Skoll Forum in Oxford and saying, God, Bono is here, I'd love to meet him. And she'll run over and she'll say, Bono, you have to come over here. And he sits down, and I have a 15-minute conversation with Bono because of Lori. Lori will say, what keeps you up at night? And I'll be very open with her. This is what keeps me up at night. She said, I know somebody who can help you with that. And she'll bring somebody over and then support them to work with the organization for over a year to help us turn certain things around. I cannot say enough about Lori, and so what I want to say to you, Lori, very directly, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Every single life saved by this organization or improved by this organization, like Ahmed or Amboise or any of the stories we're hearing tonight, every community reconciled because of the work of the frontline peace builders in this organization, every vengeance attack and even war prevented by this organization, from 2015 until as long as we exist, is thanks to you. Because we would not be here without you. And with that, I want to invite you and force you to come onto the stage to accept this award.
Search for Common Ground's 2021 Common Ground Awards.
The Common Ground Award for Uncommon Generosity.
Celebrating the truly unique leadership,
innovation,
action,
and generosity
of Lori Michaels.
I was going to say a couple of things. I guess I still will, but I don't actually remember the year I met Shamil, but the date was unmemorable, but the conversation was. And a couple things Shamil talked to me about. One was the audaciousness of well, he didn't say audacious. I thought it was audacious of going into areas where people were irrevocably divided. And by that I mean African villages in which Boko Haram had recruited young people, and these people had killed other members of their village. And then when the peace was made there, they had to be reintegrated. I can't imagine anything more difficult than doing that. But the other thing that I found most compelling was that when Iran began to develop its nuclear capabilities and then was separated from the West, Search kept back-channel conversations going between Western atomic nuclear engineers and scientists and the Iranian ones. So when the time came for a treaty to be made, the groundwork was already laid, and the conversation could go together very quickly. And I thought, this is an extraordinary organization. And if there's anything I can do to help stand it up, it would be my contribution to helping to pacify the violence that was endemic in the world. It is, of course, still endemic in the world, but Search does not leave people behind, and it does not pretend that the violence is not is irrevocable. So that was something I felt very strongly, a way in which I could help. Thank you.
Hello again, everyone. In the flurry of activity at the beginning, I forgot to share some of the ground rules for tonight. Rule 1, we're in a glass house, we're all on common ground, and we all know that people in glass houses do not throw stones, right? That said, napkins, flowers, paper airplanes of tonight's program have all been approved for throwing, so please have at it. Also, donations. Please throw your donations in the general direction of Search's fundraising team, if you will. One of the best ways to find common ground, though, is by sharing a meal. And it's time to do just that. And we'll be back with more awards afterwards, including the recipients of the 2021 Common Ground Award. Bon appétit.
And welcome back to the virtual experience of the 2021 Common Ground Awards. I'm Tim Pogo, joined by Diana Santo. What do you think so far?
Oh my gosh, the stories. Bintu and Ambrose from Mali from Youth Talks. Incredible story. Incredible story.
That's my favorite part so far, is like the videos and the depth of the background of all these awards and all these people, these recipients. I could watch this stuff all night. But to me, that actually also speaks to the entire experience. And the entire work that you guys do at Search is, it's not just like, oh, they're doing a good job, they're doing a good job. There's stories behind all this stuff, aren't there?
Right, exactly. It shows us exactly how Common Ground is supposed to look and examples of it. And we have actually one of the presenters here, Judge Raja, from our Lebanon
Have a
program.
seat. Come on, it's casual. It's all good. Yeah. It's,
Good evening.
Yeah.
Is this working?
It's working. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Thanks for taking a few minutes. We're happy you're here.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
So, Judge Raja, you really highlighted that the program is all about giving people second chances. Can you go a little bit into that?
Well, I realized that fact very early on in my career, that any of us at any given moment can become a prisoner, because becoming a prisoner is just about violating a certain norm that was put in place by a certain society in a certain time. Being in prison doesn't mean that you're ostracized or you're marginalized. You are still a human being, you are still a citizen, you just made a mistake, possibly made a mistake. And if you are not willing to give a second chance to this kind of individual, who are you willing to give a chance to? That's the first point. The second most important point, if my job as a judge is to protect society, any individual that goes into the prison system is bound to get out. And when they get out, they're not going to Neptune or to live on another planet. Everybody is going out to live in our neighborhoods, in our school districts, near my house, near the park where my kids play. So if I don't put enough effort into rehabilitating these individuals, I will not be protecting society. Protecting society is not about putting people away. It's about trying to give them second chances.
That's one of the things I'm fascinated about you and your story, is that you wouldn't think that the person who is sending somebody away is also the person then who wants to help them not come back in your room, right? And is that what it was? Like seeing too many familiar faces coming before you again? Like you thought, like, where was the thought initially that you wanted to help reform this?
The first time I ever thought about this, it was in fact when I first spent my first day at a prison and saw the conditions that these individuals were living in. And I couldn't imagine that anybody living in these conditions would get out and try to be a better citizen. They would just get out with a grudge against society, against the system, against the state, against fellow citizens. And when I realized that our prison system is just creating criminals instead of rehabilitating them and trying to protect society and trying to protect the community, and also there was a part of pure mathematics. I mean, we have life sentences in Lebanon. We even have death sentences, even though they're not implemented. If you crunch the numbers, like 98% of any individual going into our prison system is not in these two categories. They're just time sentences that will end and they will get out. So it's the state's decision. I realized that very quickly. We have to decide how these people are gonna get out and merge back into society. Will they be reformed citizens trying to find their place again, or will they be just individuals with a grudge against everything that represents society? We have to choose. Just putting them away and throwing away the key is never the solution.
Yeah. A big part of Common Ground is dignity, and I feel like this program really highlights that, right? The fact that everyone has a right to dignity, to their dignity being honored. Is that correct in this sense?
Exactly. There's a principle in corrections. Life inside should be as much as possible resembling life outside, or else we are doing something wrong. And whether it's health services or contact with your family, or access to sports, access to physical activities, access to culture, we have to exercise all efforts to make life on the inside as normal as possible. If you are an individual who has violated a social norm, has committed a crime, let's say, the only right I have as a society against you is to deprive you from your liberty. But that's it. There should be no other obligation thrust upon you. You should have the same health services as any other citizen. You should have access to visitation from your family. You should keep contact with your community. You should be able to develop yourself. And this is where Search has entered this field, focusing on these issues. They even, and this is something very remarkable, with the people that were released, like Ahmed, they focused on one thing. They didn't just try to get them a job. They tried to get them to help other people through their rehabilitation process on the outside. And that was amazing, because when you teach someone that not only you can help yourself and you can evolve, but at the same time you can help other people, this is about self-esteem. Yeah. And when you have this kind of self-esteem, you see a brighter future. This is what Search has given Ahmed and his colleagues. They have given them hope.
One last thing for you. Recently, all the information and news coming out of your country has been pretty bleak. I mean, the economy devastated, inflation flying, tough times for most people.
Don't forget the second most powerful non-nuclear explosion in the history of humanity.
The points tonight, trust, collaboration, finding breakthroughs. In that climate, in your country right now, how difficult is it to find common ground, to build this trust and collaborate?
Extremely. I'm being very honest here. It's extremely hard. And if you ask me, am I hopeful? Yes, I am. Why? Because I don't have any other choice. I have a family to take care of. I have a job to do. And I will keep on doing it until my last breath. This is why a lot of my colleagues think the same, but a lot of my colleagues also are deeply frustrated and have given up. We do not have any other choice. And concerning your issue, your question about trying to find common ground, this is the moment. This is the moment where we need it most. We have polarization about every single issue in Lebanon. People are drifting away from each other, and some parts of the community are resorting to violence in order to impose their views. And this is something where a lot of Lebanese people are not willing to accept. We are totally willing to accept difference of opinion. We have been living in differences of opinion, culture, religion for a very long time. But we will never accept any part of the community or any individual imposing their views through violence. We will not accept that. We have not accepted that. We have been an occupied country for over 30 years, and we have prevailed. We will not back down now.
Excellent. Well, we're pulling for you. We're pulling for you, your people, your country.
Thank you. Thank you.
Judge Raja, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's the virtual experience of the 2021 Common Ground Awards, and this is it's casual, guys. It's all it's all good. Next up, they're chatting. My gosh, I mean, powerful words, and gravity, like such a such. Come on, it's all good. Yeah. Jeremy Diamond from CNN,
Sorry,
our
I have to take a
MC
second to
tonight.
say
Yeah,
hello to the
how could
judge.
you not, right? I mean, yes.
Tough act to follow.
Thanks. I
Kinda
know it's your
hard.
break time. Thanks for taking a few.
Yeah, you're depriving me of my meal.
It's okay. We didn't get any either. So,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we're in the same.
I'll bring some morsels. I'll put them in the elevator.
Yeah, give me a doggy bag.
You can,
Yeah, if you hear
grab
our
them from
stomachs
there.
grumbling, it's
Yes.
all three of our stomachs.
Yes. Hopefully the folks at home are chowing down. as
I
we
hope
speak.
so.
Little takeout.
What's it like being a part of something like this? What's it mean to you to be?
You know, I
involved in
have
this?
never emceed an event like this, but it's been wonderful so far. Especially to do it for an organization like Search for Common Ground, which has such a noble mission. And in learning about this organization over the last couple of months, I'm just thrilled to be associated with this group, even just for tonight.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you and really honored to have you. This is really cool. So you're CNN's White House correspondent. What has been your experience personally with Common Ground and the kind of the polarization that's happening right now in the States?
Yeah, I mean, in opening my remarks, I made a joke about the fact that journalists are not often viewed as unifying figures these days, right? And certainly that's the case at CNN, where we have faced attacks from various people in political life. But honestly, I mean, going around the country and the opportunities I've had, I visited 47 states in the country, and you realize that people have so much more in common than they do differences, right? I mean, people ultimately care about the same basic things, those kitchen table issues, being able to get their kids a good education, being able to make a living, to put them through that education sometimes. And so as much as there is this heated rhetoric, I think if people had more conversations with one another, they would realize the commonalities that exist.
Take us inside a little bit. I mean, it's incredible that you started your gig in the most tumultuous time in this country in the past 50 years. So I'm sure you've seen some things, but what's it like inside there? I mean, what's the atmosphere like inside that room with the other journalists from around the world? I know sometimes there's very long days. I hope the coffee is good that they provide for you guys, like some snacks or something. But
There's a Starbucks very close by.
Oh, excellent. Okay, good.
Nice.
Okay, so take us inside that room.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it depends obviously on the administration. I've had the privilege now to be covering my second administration. I covered the entire presidency of Donald Trump. Now I cover President Joe Biden. Those have been very different experiences from a media perspective. I mean, our job remains the same to report the news objectively and give people the information that they need. But obviously, during the Trump years, we faced a lot more headwinds. We faced attacks from the president himself. I faced attacks from the president. And ultimately, you remain focused on your mission, right? I mean, I've had interactions with former President Trump in the briefing room where he would, instead of answering a question, choose to come out and attack. But I've still got my follow-up ready, right? I mean, that's what I'm there for. I'm not there to engage in some kind of theatrics. And so ultimately, I think remaining focused on the mission, and that mission remains the same today. And I'm privileged to be able to ask tough questions of President Biden every once in a while, of his White House press secretary, I don't know. Is that where you were looking for? Yeah.
I mean, and is it hard to never take that personally? Like, is part of you say like, oh man, the president of the United States just ripped me. Like, is it hard to keep that composure?
I mean, in the moment, honestly, I don't even, it just kind of goes right here, I had the opportunity to cover Trump from the earliest days of his campaign. So I had a relationship there already, and so I kind of knew what to expect and also knew what to expect behind the scenes. But no, in the moment, you don't really think about it, and then after you go, oh, President of the United States just said I was dumb as rocks, or whatever the thing might have been, right? But again, it doesn't deter me from the focus on holding people accountable, providing reliable, accurate information, which I think is so important in this day and age, especially.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And like you said, your goal is to provide reliable news, right? Reliable information and truth, right? Ultimately, how important is that for like a healthy ecosystem to happen here in the U.S., especially with what's happening now?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's incredibly difficult when we no longer as a nation have shared facts, right? And that was one of the big struggles during the Trump years. And, you know, I spent a lot of time going to Trump rallies and interviewing folks at those rallies. And you just continually come up against the wall when you have people who are telling you a certain set of facts that aren't facts. And there's so much disagreement and polarization, and it's true of folks on the far left as well, who sometimes have a different set of facts. But that's why it's so important for us to recognize that facts are objective, verifiable things, right? Anything other than that is your opinion, and that's fine. People are entitled to opinions, but it's difficult, obviously, to have real political debates when you can't even agree on what the issue is and what its form is.
Well,
right?
That's the starting point. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Excellent. He needs to get a bite to eat real quick before he starts the second half. Thanks for taking a few, man. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much,
having me,
Jeremy.
guys.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. They're lined up, folks. Here we go. Isam.
Isam,
Yeah.
Ganim. Thank you so much for coming, Isam. President of Search for Common Ground. There you go. There's your mic. So tonight, right, it's all about common ground. You mentioned in your speech that you are Sudanese. You've seen the conflict there. You've seen the conflict here. Can you go a little bit into that?
Yeah, sure. In fact, there are a lot of commonalities as well as differences. Usually, when you find that some people start to really inspire and work hard for dominance, whether that is economic dominance or political dominance or cultural dominance, that's when usually problems start. I saw it in Sudan, and I'm starting to see it here. And competition is not an issue, but usually with dominance and the quest for dominance, you will find that there are some behaviors and divisions and the voices of hate, the voices that keep people apart, will flourish and become very active. And if you don't disrupt that cycle very quickly, it will just affect culture, it will affect how people relate with each other, how people work with each other. And that is really the early sign of usually of violent conflict that will come later on. I saw that in Sudan. I'm seeing that in the United States here. And I think the political divisions, sometimes I think of the political division as just symptoms rather than the underlying causes. Every time you see political division, politicians not working together, or the political ideologies become extremely extreme and dismissive, that is usually a symptom of many, many underlying problems. Usually that's a symptom of either ethnic or racial or religious or economic problems and inequality in the society.
You've literally lived and worked all over the world, correct?
Correct.
Can you list some of the spots for people?
Sure. I worked initially in Sudan when there was a very large response to the humanitarian crisis that came after the drought of mid-80s. After that, I went to Somalia. In fact, when the Marines landed, I was in Mogadishu. In fact, I handed over some of the operation of the port to them. From there, I went to India, and I was working, in fact, for the government of India, but with an agency called CARE, in the largest child development program, I think, in the world. After that, I came to Kenya, so I was responsible for East Africa and the Middle East, and then after that, I became an executive, responsible basically for the programmatic policy, and then after that, after working for so many years for broad poverty reduction, I started to ask myself questions about the impact of my work. And then I was invited and decided to take a position with an agency called Child Fund to focus on children. And after that, I basically was invited to come to SERS. And I came to SERS because I saw with my own eyes how decades of progress in development, in education and health could be wiped out within 1 week of eruption of violent conflict.
Wow.
And I thought that that's very strong.
I mean, apart from knowing where to find good food on basically half the planet because of where you've lived and worked, I'm curious to know, though, are there things that you experienced and learned at each one of your stops along the way that have taught you about the world, about life, and made you become who you are?
Thank you for that question. I would say human beings everywhere are the same in terms of their basic needs and wants. Everyone, everywhere, wants dignity. Every person I met in all of these places, hotspots, live based on hope. And when you take out dignity and hope from people, that's when the real destruction happens. When you nurture it and support it, miracles happen. People come from ashes to really build whatever they want to build. And I think that is a major lesson for me, because we tend sometimes to focus on the material aspects, but this issue of dignity and hope are fundamental, I think, to have the resilience to absorb the shocks, adapt, recover from it, and adapt to a new situation in the best possible way.
Yeah. And what would you say to people right now, watching right now, that have lost hope? Where can they find that?
Hope is inside them. They don't need to look far away. And hope is not given. It is something that is nurtured and taken within you. So for everyone, just look inside yourself. Look at your child, look at your daughter, look at your wife, look at your partner, look at your neighbor, and you will find that hope. And sometimes it is very near to you, and that's why you miss it.
And you know what? You're telling me earlier that some of the programs that Search does around the world are not just social or not just political, but also activities and fun as well, right? Like sports and whatnot. I hear you're a pretty mean football player.
Wow, how did you know that?
Sources. I've got some sources.
Unbelievable.
Someone told us. I don't know who.
I guess that is true.
I guess that's another unifying thing around the world, right?
Absolutely. I played football or soccer until Division 1, so I was very happy with that. And I learned a lot from soccer or football. I learned a lot. Not to give up. Offense is the best defense sometimes, and how at the end of the day it's about sport.
Mm-hmm.
If you are not winning the score, you are still winning a match.
There you go.
And so many of we have programs, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Search where we, like the team, the show that we have in various countries. We've had like football matches to bring people together. What is it about soccer? You just mentioned a couple of things that lead to common ground.
Correct. Everyone is playing with that ball, and everyone wants to score and defend. So there are a lot of common ground between them. And guess what? Usually who's the most valuable player? In many cases, those are not the people who score. Those are the middle ground people. People who plays in the middle, connect the defense and the offense. And usually they are the most valuable players. They are not necessarily the most famous, but when they are not there, the team really misses.
They tie it all together,
They
right?
tied it all together.
Absolutely. Isa, thank you for taking some time and stopping up here in our 21st Floor Lounge.
Great.
Thank you so much,
Appreciate
Isa.
it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. You too.
Oh, it's all good. Orion is here. Here we go.
Yeah.
Orion Vandenbroek. Welcome.
Welcome,
Hi.
Orion. Woo!
Thank you for taking a few minutes of your time. I appreciate it. What you do is fascinating to me, honestly. You work in parts of the world telling stories. Your colleagues refer to you as a storyteller. With your work in communications with Search, can you just kind of just tell people like just what your job is all about?
Okay. So I'm the communication specialist for West Africa, well, for Search, but in West Africa. So my job is pretty much shedding light on what we do, the impact of our work, and pulling stories and traveling around the region and meeting with people we work with and listening to them.
And where are you based right now?
In Senegal.
Senegal. Excellent.
Yes.
Are there? I mean, we saw the kids in the radio station, and that's such an incredible story. I can't wait to learn more about that. But are there other programs you worked on, other stories you came across that have just sort of made you stop and think and have just impressed you and maybe even changed you as a person?
Yeah, there are too many.
Let's have a few.
But so the radio program is not the first one. So we've been working also in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and other countries for so many years. But those ones really touched me. So they have really powerful radio programs. I think that's really their niche, and we've been working there since they've been working there since 20 years. And I don't know if that's just a particular story, but I remember just when I landed, for example, in Liberia at the airport, when people asked me, "Why are you here?" and I told them I told them the name of the radio house that Search has created in Liberia. I told them I'm here for Talking Drum, and they were like, "Okay, I grew up with them," and just
Really?
come in. So everyone.
They were fans.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everyone knows them, and I had the chance to meet former staff from Search in Liberia, and I remember one of the staff telling me the story during the Civil War that rebels actually entered the compound of the organization and they stole a car. And she told me, she was like, everyone knew us and everyone liked us because we were not taking any sides. So they went straight to the commander and they asked for the car and they actually got it back. So
oh, wow.
Yeah. So
amazing.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And for those that don't know, at Search, we work directly with people from the locations where there's conflict, right? So those that are closest to conflict. And you, Orion, you go to these places, you collect these stories, you talk to these people. How important is dignity in storytelling? And also, why is it so important to really emphasize and highlight these voices from around the world?
Okay. So I think in storytelling, dignity is like every part of the process. From listening to, I don't know, I feel, maybe. So when I meet these people, I'm always grateful because they're not just telling me stories. Like they often tell me the biggest challenge or the tougher things they've been through, and I'm a complete stranger. Often when I meet, it's just the first time, and it just after 5-10 minutes they just enter straight the story and tell me that. So I think dignity for me is just at every part of the process. So listening to them, and as well then being able to have other people hearing their story so I think it's important to have those people telling us about it, because they are the experts. They are the ones who know exactly what the conflicts are in those parts of the world we work in. And
and I think you put it best in your speech when you said that for a lot of them this is the first time that they feel heard, that they feel seen. I think that's very powerful.
Yeah.
And it must be so amazing too how giving these voices is such a powerful thing.
Yeah.
It's such a positive thing, right?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm like choking.
I feel that we always but we often underestimate the power just listening to people. And I remember that story, which is not part of Search, but years and years ago in Belgium, I met, there were an occupation of Afghan refugees, and I kept going back there and just listening to them, and and I remember I told one of them, I was like, I sometimes don't feel legitimate to be here, like I'm not bringing anything material, or and his answer was like, you do much more than that. You just listen to us. And I remember he said that what actually makes us feel human. It's not when you give us something. And I think that just stuck with me, and that just comes with me in every mission and with every participant I meet in our program. Just like already listening, it's
Absolutely incredible. Orion, you do incredible work. And I'm fascinated by it. I can't wait to see what you do in the future and more programs that you work with Search. And thank you for hanging out. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your stories. How are we doing on time?
Thank you so much, Orion.
Are we good? Oh, our last guest is around the corner. So bonus time. You can hang on another minute or so if you want. Here he is. Come on in.
Thank you so much, Orion. Thank you.
JT
Hello,
Rogers,
welcome,
everyone.
welcome.
Hi. Yep, grab that. There you go. Happy to have you join us.
Happy to be here.
Let's quick talk about the film, about Oslo. So the script comes from your initial play, correct?
Yes.
And so what was the initial inspiration to even do this story?
Well, you often, as a storyteller, you're always looking for the stories that you want to write, and you're hunting under rocks and stones and rivers, and sometimes, if you're lucky, a story will come to you. And this instance, almost to the day, 10 years ago, up the street, 40 blocks near Lincoln Center, P.J. Clark's, the watering hole there across from the LCT Theater, I had drinks.
Local tip?
I had very good burgers, great burgers. I had drinks with a diplomat who told me, after a few rounds, about the secret Oslo back channel that led to the Oslo Peace Accords, the first ever agreement between the PLO and the Israeli government in the early 90s, which hit like a thunderbolt at the time and seemed impossible. It would be, as I tried to explain context to younger actors when we were doing the play in New York and London, as if in the early days of the War on Terror, if it turned out that the Bush administration, Al-Qaeda, were sitting in a room talking. That's how tremendously thunderboltish, if we can coin a word, this meant. But like most Americans, I thought we had done it for my sins. And so to discover that a tiny band of Norwegian, Israeli, and Palestinians had met in a castle in Norway in secret, drinking Johnny Walker Black and talking about their families and trying to find a way towards peace.
And eating waffles, right?
And eating waffles. The waffle recipe is in the play and the film. I was off to the races. Amazing. It's the kind of story that interests me as a writer.
Incredible. Talk about how important things like storytelling are to finding common ground.
Well, journalism is what teaches us what is happening in the world when it's done right. But storytelling teaches us how to be human, and it teaches us how to expand our radius of empathy. And what good storytelling can do is make the other seen. And we're living in a moment where the divisions between me, as it were, and the other are so pronounced and so violent, now coming home to roost in my own country, that for me, storytelling becomes not only a artistic necessity, but a political necessity. Politics in the small and the polis, the sense of the community of working together to create a sense of togetherness.
Yeah. And JT, did you, as you went through this process, kind of learn anything about your own kind of to challenge yourself to find common ground, or any bias that you had?
Yes, that's a great question. I think that when I would say this as a starting point, when you're a storyteller, you fixate on something. You sort of bore in it like a woodchuck chucking wood. You just go at it, right. And it's only later when you're done chewing the wood that you sort of figure out what you were doing. You just trust your instincts. You follow your nose, and it was quite a long time into the process when one of the actors I was working on a developmental workshop said to me, so, because, sidebar, the actual Oslo Accords and how it came about and its proliferations afterwards are still super contentious. Should it have happened? Was it biased? did it create false hopes? Was it incredible? Was it in fact not what people thought? So everyone's criticized it in ways they shouldn't have. All of this is continuing and being argued to this day. And so I was asked by a smart actor, so do you think they should have done it? And I paused and I thought, you know, I've actually never asked myself that question because it seemed like that wasn't for me. I wasn't approaching material as a citizen, I was approaching as an artist. But what in the making of it, in the interviewing all the participants, or many of the participants, and sort of seeping myself in the risks they took and the triumphs and the struggles, it really became clear to me that I truly believe they should have done it, and that, as a diplomat said to me after he'd seen the film of Oslo, he said that there must be dialogue. There must always be dialogue, no matter how dark and violent the times are. And I think that coming to this sort of almost slightly messianic belief in that I have now came from doing this project.
Incredible. I mean, and this sort of project must have been just so just incredibly interesting. First of all, I mean, apart from the historical things you would have learned just researching and whatever else, like, is there anything that you have seen in the Oslo Accords that you've maybe applied to your own life?
Well, you know, it's interesting that there is a deep overlap, if that analogy holds, between art making and peacemaking. And what I mean by that is, when I was being walked through what they did, so that sort of the instigator or the sort of ringmaster, and I mean that in a positive sense, of the small band doing this was Tyrod Larson, who was a social scientist, not even a diplomat, at the time, in his early 40s. And his idea was that the attempts at making peace in the Middle East were failing, including the official talks, the Washington-sponsored talks that had been happening for 2 years in the early 90s all over the world, because they were so public, because everyone was watching, because everyone was posturing, everyone was making, they were saying one thing around the conference table and something else to their back home base and something third to the media. Mm-hmm. And what he set upon was the idea that people had to come into a private space where no one's watching in small groups. The groups could never change. You couldn't swap out negotiators. It could only be the same people every time. They could fight as much as they wanted, but when they were done in the room, as it were, they had to socialize together, and they had to eat all their meals together. So they would create a common language. And when I was told this, I thought, oh, that's exactly how you rehearse a play. You have to create an artificial construct that creates an authentic intimacy at warp speed. And that was illuminating to me.
It's incredible. I loved it. I mean, seriously, it was great. Oslo, folks, check it out.
Yeah.
It was excellent.
Thank
JT,
you.
Appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Diana, I think we're ready to head back downstairs.
Yep, it's about
14th
that
floor.
time.
We're off.
Here at Glass House
Thank
Chelsea
you so much.
in Manhattan. The second portion of the awards. Let's go back to the podium.
Here we go.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. How's the food? We enjoying? I promise you guys we're getting close here. We're getting close to the big moment of the night, the Common Ground Award. But if I can just have your attention for a second, let me welcome you back with a message from tonight's organizers. Apparently there are gift bags. I don't know, has anybody gotten a gift bag yet? Because if not, this whole next paragraph doesn't make sense. No gift, it's all right, we're gonna pretend we have gift bags. Apparently they contain carefully curated items to remind you of the evening and to promote the quest for common ground. There were a few things that didn't quite make the final cut. We had some conflict transformation stress balls. There were also peace builder dog and cat cookies for those who want those famed enemies to trust, collaborate, and find breakthroughs. I just couldn't see it, so I nixed that one. Our next award, though, recognizes that peace building is bumpy, and it isn't possible without people trusting each other. All of this is told in the movie Oslo. Enjoy.
Search for Common Ground's 2021 Common Ground Awards.
The Common Ground Award for Outstanding Storytelling.
Celebrating artists who use their power of storytelling
to break stereotypes,
build bridges,
and turn enemies into allies.
I see. Maya. If a man does not fight for what he believes, who is he?
Maya,
Yes, my daughter.
my daughter is named Maya. My youngest. She is the light of my life.
Hi, my name is Bartlett Shear. I directed that film you just saw. Yeah, louder. No, I'm kidding. I just want to explain the film. I have a whole written thing here, but I want to explain the film just so you have some idea of what we're talking about. My friend J.T. Rogers and I made a film during the pandemic based on a play that we did on Broadway called Oslo. Oslo tells this. Thank you. Oslo tells the story of two Norwegian diplomats who pulled together and secretly set up a back channel between Israel and Palestine, where they took a group of negotiators to Norway to begin to build an opportunity and a bridge for peace and make this thing happen, make this incredible thing happen, which led in 1992 and 3 to really the only peace agreement between Israel and Palestine in the region. There's a lot of arguments about whether it's a good peace agreement or a bad peace agreement, but the principle that dialogue and people talking together is more valuable than solving problems through violence. And that was the whole premise of what we did when we went to make the film of Oslo. But I'm here to introduce our great storyteller, J.T. Rogers. So I'm going to talk a little bit about him. It's a short psychoanalysis. I hope you're okay with it. He's a dear friend and collaborator, and I wonder myself how he got here. How did he begin this journey to finding common ground to work that dared to capture these incredible political conflicts on a global scale? He's written plays about Rwanda, about Afghanistan, and about Israel and Palestine. He's in the middle of making a TV show for HBO called Tokyo Vice in Tokyo about the Yakuza. It's insane. I don't know how he does this. But what's the origin story of a writer who has dared to tell stories to help us understand and seek common ground? Well, J.T. Rogers is a child of divorce. Okay, I'm just going to be straightforward about it. He grew up ferrying between a father who was a professor of political science in Missouri and a mother who was an artist in New York. He split his time as a young man between being educated about world politics, including living for a year with his brother and father in a village in Indonesia, and being dragged to museums and avant-garde off-Broadway theater. It was a stressful and challenging childhood, and he was asked a lot of as a young man. The two worlds were very different, and like any child of divorce, he found himself navigating the realities of his parents and trying to reconcile within himself the competing messages about the nature of the world, about art, and all the while trying to create meaning and harmony and happiness in his own life out of a situation that was polarized and in conflict. So what did he do? He grew up and took those experiences of travel, of art, of theater, of foreign education, of influence, and he became a great playwright. He wrote incredible plays, and the play Oslo is one of the most, I would say, one of the most important plays of the last decade, and it talks about these embittered enemies. He was born and raised to tell these stories of world politics and conflict on a vast scale and to help all of us in the way that this organization does, and the way storytellers can do, to help people through the kind of weird world that we have in the theater, to experience something that we don't know, to hear about it, to understand what it does to us, and to try to open our imaginations to other kinds of experiences. So, ladies and gentlemen, I can't tell you how lucky I am to know him and to watch him grow in his work and watch him reach for the stars. No artist in storytelling is more deserving of this award of seeking common ground of all of our work in humanity than J.T. Rogers.
I did not realize till tonight that Bartlett is not only my most treasured collaborator, but apparently my therapist. So this is what I've learned to see. Yeah. Thank you, Bartlett, so much for those lovely and thoughtful comments. It's an enormous pleasure to be here tonight and to be so honored and to be honored with the remarkable, if we could honestly, heartfelt, the people we've had tonight already, just extraordinary. And I have to say, it also feels like kismet because Oslo, the play and the film, are the story of peacemakers struggling and striving to find common ground between Israel and Palestine in the early 90s, and common ground are peacemakers that have been working towards that since 1991 when they opened their first office in Jerusalem. So as I said, it feels a bit like kismet, and I'm really honored to be overlapping with such an extraordinary organization. I did write the film and the play Oslo, but over the years I've worked with Bartlett, he has a maxim that he uses in rehearsal, which I have come to hold dear, and that is that individual acclaim in the arts is always a collective endeavor. Always. And this never so much, for me, never more so than in the creation of the play and the film Oslo. Not only in our film, extraordinary producers we had with Mark Platt and Steven Spielberg and HBO could not have been more generous and supportive, especially as we shot through the darkest days of COVID. But also our extraordinary cast, almost exclusively Israeli and Palestinian, and the remarkable talents, our crew, our team. But two people, one you've met tonight and one you haven't, but both who are here tonight, I want to recognize. One is Bartlett. If any of you have seen the film, let alone seen his production at Lincoln Center Theater, you know that he is the maestro. And the film would not exist and not be remotely as, for me, successful if he would not have been at the helm. And there is our producing partner, Canberra Overend, who truly, and I'm going to speak a little French here, because in the theater we do that, but truly in the darkest days of COVID was we shot this film in Europe, in Prague, and when it turned out to be, just happened to be the worst place for COVID in the world, she put this film on her back and said, "This motherfucker is getting made." And she did. So the other bit of kismet for the night is it is almost exactly 10 years to the day that I discovered what to me was news, which was there was a secret back channel that led to the Oslo Accords. And I, through a friend of Bart's, who turned out to be one of the instrumental figures in this thing, about 40 blocks up that way, the Upper West Side. I think my geography is right. We'll just pretend that that's the way it goes. And we met for drinks near Lincoln Center, where Bart and I were doing a play, and after the second or third round, he started telling me about this secret back channel. Now, this is going to be the audience participation part of the evening. So, like me, how many of you are American here tonight? Okay, good. Hands down. All right, step two. How many of you either remember personally, like myself as a young man, or know of the iconic, at the time, heart-stoppingly optimistic handshake but in the Rose Garden with Bill Clinton presiding with Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin as they signed? Okay. How many of those people, like me at the time, now be honest, thought that we had brokered the peace? Yeah, there's more of you, but some of you are being honest. That speaks to our myopia as Americans. I, as a politics junkie, still believe this until I sat down with Tyrod Larson, who was one of the architects of this, and he explained that in reality, a small band of Norwegians, junior members of government and academics, and members of the PLO and the Israeli government decided to meet in secret in a castle in suburban Oslo, drink Johnny Walker Black, talk about their children, eat really good food, make fun of their leaders, and find a way to make peace. And when I was told the story, I thought, please, God, let me write that. And the reason I felt so strongly was it spoke to the kind of story that interests me as an artist and as a citizen. Journalism tells us, when it is done well, what is actually happening in the world. Storytelling tells us how to be human and how to expand our empathy in the world. And that, in the world we're living in now, I submit to you, has become a political act. And so here we had a story that, as spoken about here with Search, that delves into the true idea that the speed of peace is trust. And here was a story about how to build trust among implacable enemies in a world that said that was impossible. And that, to me, seemed worthy not only of my time, as something that I would dedicate and be honored to be attached to. Now, when we made the film, as I mentioned with Canberra, it was an arduous experience, but it was extraordinary to have these Israeli and Palestinian artists who knew, unlike those of us in the States, who had lived and breathed this experience, had incredible nuanced detail, and could teach us, Bart and I, who felt that we were experts, could teach us things we didn't even know, and to see how they would talk over their meals, Israeli and Palestinian artists, and share their thoughts and conflicts and beliefs. Now, when the film came out, it turned out by the happenstance of fate to be May of this year. It came out on HBO at the very moment that bombs were falling in Palestine and rockets were landing in Israel. And to be quite frank with you, I feared that we had erred terribly by an act of the bitter hand of fate. I feared that the world would look at the film and say, well, this is a relic of the past, this is a naive fantasy that could never happen again, and I'm sorry, but we don't believe it. And that would have been an acceptable response. However, what was so moving and galvanizing, both as an artist and a citizen, was that that was not the response. That there has been an embracing of the film around the world, and that no more so than in the Middle East, and specifically in Israel-Palestine, where it has been seen as a fair and balanced, and if not difficult film, and that as more than one diplomat has said to me after seeing it from the region, what is good about it, and I am proud of this aspect of it, is that it tells the audience that no matter how violent, how dark the time, that dialogue must be an option, that dialogue must happen, and that you must be willing to sit across from your enemy. And that has meant a great deal to me. And now having a few moments to sort of breathe and look back on the experience of making the work and talk to people who have seen it in Japan, in the Middle East, in the UK, in the United States, I think, or I hope and think, that what people are responding to in our film is what I responded to when I first heard the story, 40 blocks up, having martini as the Upper West Side, is that at the center of the Oslo Channel is a radical, radical act. And that is that members of the Israeli government and members of the PLO, risking their governments and in many cases their very lives, sat across from each other and were willing and brave enough to see their mortal enemy as human, and then slowly to be surprised to find them as friends and as people they loved, and to be transformed by that experience. And in the political moment we live in now in this country and around the world, that is something we can all learn from. Thank you so much.
All right, folks, this next award is all about spotting a great idea and investing in it. The results, they're priceless. Watch.
Search for Common Ground's 2021 Common Ground Awards.
The Common Ground Award for Outstanding Vision.
Honoring Tiger 21 for their visionary approach to philanthropy, a mix of entrepreneurship,
compassion, and urgency
in pursuit of peace and common ground.
That's a hard act to follow. Hi, I'm Waidehigo Clay. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Solia, which is a sister organization of Search for Common Ground.
And I'm Maxine Rich from Search for Common Ground.
So Maxine, you know as well as I do that getting people to buy into a new idea is never easy. So When we first pitched Tiger 21 on a proposed project geared towards nurturing a generation of leaders who have the ability to engage constructively across differences, we were thrilled that they also thought this was a great idea. If you haven't already heard of Tiger 21, know that many people haven't. They are a well-kept secret. They are a group of high net worth individuals with a unique approach to investment and philanthropy, who can spot a good idea a mile away. Combining their expertise in entrepreneurship with compassion and a recognition of urgency around doing worthwhile work, they not only gave us as Search and Solia their time and their support, but their candor and their expertise, which allowed us to pilot First Year Connect, or otherwise known as 1YC. 1YC is a dialogue program for first-year college students here in the United States. As microcosms of society, college campuses regularly see the starkest of our divides play out. So this program, based on a tried and tested dialogue model, brings the entire freshman class together in small group facilitated dialogue for what we believe is a transformative learning by doing journey that sets them up for constructive campus citizenship.
I was a facilitator for First Year Connect, convening incoming college students who reflect the amazing diversity of the United States. These students are navigating a lot. They're worried about bonding with their new classmates, moving away from their families, keeping up with virtual learning, taking on new responsibilities as adult citizens in our democracy. Despite such a difficult context, I watched these students seize the tools presented by the program, leaning into tough conversations and holding empathy for others who were different from them.
Now, the participants of the program provided us with tremendous feedback. 85% of them saying they were glad someone made them do it, because someone did make them do it. 75% saying that the program motivated them to learn further about how dialogue can address tensions, and so on and so forth. But really, no statistic can illustrate the true impact that we saw. For that, I'm going to share just a very brief story, and I know you all have been listening to a lot of stories, so forgive me. But it actually comes from a professor at one of our partner campuses who, at the outset, transparently speaking, was a little bit skeptical of the program. And he told this story about his classes. He had 2 classes, communication classes, back to back. And in the January of 2021, he decided that he wanted to open up a very honest discussion with those classes about the political events that were unfolding here around them. And he said, so I opened the first class and I told them that I wanted us to discuss the events of the 6th of January. And he said, in my career, I've never seen it. They shut down, all the video cameras turned themselves off. Nobody wanted to say a word. He said, I was shocked. I've never been able to not infuse discussion in a class. So when the second class came in, he, in his frustration, was very transparent with them. And he said, look, this is what just happened. What can I do to have a better conversation with you all? And he said a bunch of hands went up. And when I called on them, they all said the same thing. They said, why don't you try the way we do it in the First Year Connect program? And so to me, that proves the impact, but it also pointed to something that our champions at Tiger 21 had put to us when we went to them with the idea. They said, you have to be able to show that the learning from the program gets transferred to their campus behavior. And that's the only way you're going to prove its real impact.
And that impact extends beyond the campus. My own facilitation experience strengthened my ability to build common ground. When last year's racial justice movement sparked tensions in my hometown, I was able to facilitate dialogue between neighbors. Tiger 21's investment also inspired Search for Common Ground to establish Common Ground USA with an entire component focused on mobilizing youth activism, and inspired me to join the new initiative as a program manager.
So the members of Tiger 21, speaking of inspiration, really did inspire me as someone trying to work on this program with them. Their willingness to roll up their sleeves, ask us all of the hard questions and provide guidance was truly remarkable. The founder of Tiger 21, Michael Sonnenfeld himself, gave his time to have a super important, candid, and transformative conversation with one of our campus partners when they were grappling with a funding hurdle. Today, Tiger 21's brand of philanthropy is having an enormous impact across the United States to tackle issues as diverse as ending homelessness to starting socially responsible businesses. And it all starts when they spot a good idea that they think can be great.
And we can do that too. That's why this year's Common Ground Award for Vision is going to Tiger 21.
So I ask you please to welcome on stage the founder of Tiger 21, Mr. Michael Sonnenfeld.
Thank you, ladies. You know, it might seem a little strange, the previous presentation about Oslo and the one you just heard, but if I can ask you to each take out your little figurative sewing needles, I'm going to bring them together, because without one, we wouldn't have had the other. In August of 1993, I was summoned by Prime Minister Rabin for what was called a Four Eyes meeting to start an organization that would pave the way among the American Jewish community for peace, because I didn't know that the next week he would send me an invitation to come to the White House. I don't believe it was on the Rose Garden. I think it was on the East Lawn of the White House, where they shook hands, and that started a journey of visiting every country in the Middle East that bordered on Israel, 7 times with Yasser Arafat, 50 trips to the Middle East as part of the back channel that you talked about. At the same time, I was working with the United Nations on peacekeeping missions where we went to 28 warring zones. And for an entire decade, I was on a personal mission of searching for common ground. I didn't know about this organization, but that was the fundamental meaning of my life. So consider that one piece of a patchwork. In the 2000s, I was thinking about how do business leaders organize their philanthropic activities? What is it that they could do that could have real meaning? And we tried to define within our foundation what were the primary goals. And over the last 20 years, the number one goal we thought was climate change. Not in any order. An additional goal was weapons of mass destruction and terrorism. And a third goal was income inequality and financial distress. How do you build a program? And for years, we were looking at these individually. And one day it became clear that the piece that tied those all together was education. If we don't educate people to be critical thinkers, if our colleges don't produce people who can grapple with these problems, all of these problems will become completely overwhelming. So consider that a second piece of patchwork. It was into that mix that Common Ground came to Tiger 21, where we were searching to find ways that our members, who were incredibly successful entrepreneurs, but many at the beginning of a journey of philanthropy, could translate the success they had into the meaning that they wanted. And Common Ground gave us this extraordinary opportunity to try a program. But what was most amazing is when I was in the killing fields of Cambodia, or sitting with Yasser Arafat in the middle of the night, or in Rwanda right after the tragedy, or Angola, Syria, Cyprus, the 28 war zones that we visited, it was always that the problems were over there. We were living in the land of plenty, in the land of good. And all of a sudden, in the most recent years, we realized that those problems were being reflected on our very campuses and our very cities. And so the thought a generation ago that we would need Common Ground to bring their extraordinary skills to our education system was just beyond any imagination. When they came just a few years ago, it became immediately obvious that this was an extraordinary opportunity to take skills that I had observed and they had displayed and worked through in conflict after conflict around the globe, to the problems we're having on every college campus that are being driven to inaction because of the polarization that we see in our society now happening on our college campuses. Our kids are afraid to do the things that they want to do. The security costs are overwhelming, and the distractions from the kind of education that I suspect most of the people in this room got. If you haven't been on a college campus to see what's going on, you should, because it'll scare the bejesus out of you about what potential are we creating for the next generation to solve the problems that need to be solved. That's what Campus Connect, this program that we're working on, is about. I couldn't be prouder to be part of it. And I just want to end with a little bit of a thought. Yesterday, I appear on one of the channels, or a couple of the business channels, and I was on a business channel that was talking about the facts of the presidency. And I heard the announcer talking about our strategic ambiguity in Taiwan. For those of you students of China, you'll know that the U.S. has had a policy of neither encouraging Taiwan's independence, but wanting to preserve its independent status. And it's a very complicated thing. And our president talked about, well, of course we want to support Taiwan. And he used the word independence, and one of his aides must have said, no, Mr. President, we don't use that word independence. So he corrected himself. He said, no, we don't advocate their independence. We advocate the strength and goodwill and so forth. And the newscaster used this little misstatement as a way to say, you see that Biden is terrible, he's abandoning China. And it was just out and out misinformation and lies and an entire embarrassment to see that when national problems become political footballs, you have the seeds of division that are tearing this country apart. And I make that because in our national discourse, we are having these kind of seeds of division that the supposed media is creating for their own benefit. So how do we take college kids and make them understand the power of common ground so that as they go out into their careers, they can avoid this kind of destructive behavior that is ripping the country apart and turning patriots into partisans? We don't need partisanship, we need patriotism, we need a sense of being part of a common ground and a common man, and I encourage you each to think about how to do that. Thank you very much.
All right, it's that time. Time for the big award of the night. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the 2021 Common Ground Award.
The 2021 Common Ground Award,
a recognition from the global Search for Common Ground community,
honoring those who inspire us to pursue a safer, healthier,
and more just society.
Good evening. My name is Neelan Parker, and I'm the Executive Director for Common Ground USA, a bold new initiative of search to mitigate political hate and extremist violence and to build towards a truly inclusive America. We are answering a near universal call for common ground.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kemi Aloafioku, and I am the Program Manager for Common Ground USA. You hear a lot of cynicism in America today. We're too divided to come together, some say. And why should we try it all? The recipients of our 2021 Common Ground Award, Phoebe and Keith, beg to differ. They see possibilities where many see limitations. Difference as a creative force rather than a destructive one. We at Search for Common Ground share with this commitment to finding hope in seemingly impossible places. At Search, we call our process the Common Ground approach. It starts with building trust across differences. With that trust, you are able to catalyze collaboration between perceived opponents. And finally, that collaboration generates breakthroughs for peace.
From the inception of their friendship, 2003 or 2004, this is actually a point on which they have not found common ground. Phoebe and Keith have done just that. They built a bridge of trust with each other. They worked together to establish the Plessy and Ferguson Foundation and are helping communities across the country reflect on our shared history in order to build a shared future. Keith and Phoebe are descendants of the defendant and judge in Plessy versus Ferguson, a court case largely considered, and rightly so, the worst Supreme Court case in the history of our country because it played the basis for the Jim Crow era legislation for almost 70 years. They worked together to achieve Homer Plessy's pardon and have historical markers added to the New Orleans landscape. Phoebe and Keith show us the country that we can be when we bravely choose to reach out to each other with humility, dignity, and care. When we refuse to believe that the barriers between us are insurmountable and strive to climb them instead, when no matter how different our identities, backgrounds, or policy positions might be, we decide not to give up on each other. Ladies and gentlemen, the recipients of the 2021 Common Ground Award, Keith Plessy and Phoebe Ferguson.
Good evening. Thank you. I feel dwarfed by all the people that came on this stage before us. So with that in mind, I say, good evening. My name is Keith Plessy.
And I'm Phoebe Ferguson.
We come a long way from the Plessy versus Ferguson case. We're honored tonight that Search for Common Ground has chosen us as the recipients of the highest honor. From Plessy v. Ferguson to Plessy and Ferguson. We founded the Plessy and Ferguson. We founded the Plessy and Ferguson Foundation in 2009, and yes, we did meet in 2004. When we founded the organization, we founded it along with the gentleman you saw in the picture, Keith Weldon Medley, who was an historian, along with another historian, Pastor Brenda Square, and a retired educator, Alexander Pierre Tyrod Jr. His father is a famous lawyer in Louisiana who he brought 64 cases before Louisiana courts to get equal teacher pay by himself at 64 parishes in Louisiana. And that's his son. He's one of our board members. Now, together with our amazing small board of 7 people, our mission was always to honor the work of Homer Plessy and the Citizens Committee and their courage, commitment, and sacrifices, and the decades-long pursuit for justice and equality.
Well, tonight, we have come to understand a little bit more about Search for Common Ground, because admittedly, we only learned about it on Friday. So we're learning a lot. Some of those things are new language. Aside from all the global languages spoken tonight, some internal language that Common Ground uses, apparently, is the word searchers. At first I thought, I'm not sure how we fit with that title. And then I thought, for the last 11 years, Keith and I have been searching for ways to bring a deeper understanding to the efforts of the Citizens Committee, but we never imagined that there would come a day when our work would result in a pardon for Homer Plessy.
We strongly believe in the power of common ground. Once in an interview with Michelle Miller, CBS This Morning Saturday, one of my statements was, we just need to find some common ground.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
You had another really great statement in that interview. I never forgot it. He did, but I didn't. He ended that interview, I believe, by saying, my world is a canvas, and my painting is peace.
Yes.
Yeah. But I want to tell you something, find this perfect spot here. Something about the process that went into making this pardon happen. And it speaks to everything that you all have been talking about tonight, about bringing disparate communities, organizations, or people together in order to effect a positive change. So it was just really a few weeks ago. A colleague was reading Keith Weldon Medley's book, and she read this date. I just want you to know that we have probably celebrated every possible annual Plessy-related event that could be celebrated. But then I get an email saying, have you ever celebrated, the date that Homer Plessy actually pled guilty? I'm like, well, no. Why would, no? She said, well, he pled guilty on January 11th, 1897. That's exactly on January 11th, 2022, will be 125 years since he had to plead guilty and pay a $25 fine because the prosecutors of the day decided that it wasn't enough that the Supreme Court had ruled that separate but equal was constitutional. He had to be convicted and found guilty of a crime. So the stars just happened to be aligned because we had just elected a very progressive district attorney in New Orleans. That's a big deal, by the way, just saying. So progressive that he had the brilliant idea of creating an Office of Civil Rights inside the district attorney's office. Further, he hired the executive director of the Innocence Project to head that civil rights division. Inside, can I repeat this? The district attorney's office. So that said, we approached the district attorney with this date and said, what are the possibilities that on this anniversary we could request a pardon for Homer Plessy? Well, they were thrilled at the idea, and they went to work. And in the process of researching how this might be possible, his civil rights investigators, the team, discovered a law that that no one seemed to have known about, no one has ever used, called the Avery Alexander pardon law. And you want to say something about Avery Alexander?
Well, the amazing thing about the discovery of the Avery Alexander Act, being that Homer Plessy was convicted of the separate car law. It was the Separate Car Act, number 111. And it caused him to be convicted for a crime of violating the separate car law when he signed on January 11th, he signed his paper to change his not guilty plea to a guilty plea and pay a $25 fine. Well, the Avery Alexander Act was sitting on the books when the discovery was made since 2006. Now, Avery Alexander was a 1940s, 50s, 60s civil rights worker who continued the fight that Homer Plessy and the Citizens Committee began in the 1800s. Well, Mr. Alexander's act was never used since 2006. And when they discovered that, it stated that any defendant that was charged with a crime, and that crime was a segregationist, discriminatory law that they broke in committing that crime, well, they were up for a pardon because the crime was the law itself. So in the Avery Alexander Act, Homer Plessy will be the first recipient posthumously to get a pardon from our governor, John Bell Edwards. And his signing is on the horizon. And I'll tell you, it's like Phoebe was saying, the stars are in line, to say that it's coming from inside the DA's office, that his predecessor convicted my ancestor. And he is the guy who's going to undo it in the DA's office. So when he brings it to the governor, we thought for a minute, the parole and pardon board is probably one of the hardest hurdles to jump. And we met with these folks in a Zoom meeting to bring the case before them to grant Homer Plessy a pardon. Well, when we looked at the faces on the Zoom, we saw tears. And this was a pardon board that's tough, and they don't grant you a pardon if you're not due for one. So in the case of 125 years ago, to say that my ancestor was the symbol of segregation and separate but equal, that they would remove that stigma 125 years later. But we thought also that the governor might be a little bit hesitant about signing it. He had to look at it and so forth. Well, we've seen newspaper articles where he can't wait to sign that pardon, and he wants to make Louisiana a first in that effort.
So Keith and I hope that people around the world will take this opportunity to reflect on the ongoing injustices which continue to happen every day in our society. We are so grateful for this organization's work in supporting and acknowledging the efforts of so many to create lasting peace. Thank you.
Search for Common Ground's 2021 Common Ground Awards.
The CEO of Search for Common Ground,
Shamal Idris.
That was beautiful. Thank you. I want to end this evening with 3 rounds of expressions of really profound gratitude. The first are for the people who made this evening possible. So our host committee members, all of you, Bryna Lynette, Peter Shapiro, Laura and David Ross, Nikki Stern, Todd Reckler, Beth and Eric Berman, Gloria Joseph, Hassan Murphy, Lisa Caden, and William Spiegel. I love that we're now at a point in the organization where I actually have to look at the paper, because before it was like 1 person, 2 people, so that's great. Thank you. Actually, I will ask you to hold applause because I'm going to go through a few rounds. You will get tired. I want the due applause to be for them all. Every member of our board here in the U.S., our board in Belgium, I'd like to ask you to stand, please, if you're in this room. Every member of the Search for Common Ground board. And then not yet, they'll get their due. And the staff of Search for Common Ground here, particularly, I'd like you all to stand, but particularly the development, marketing, and communications team that made this possible tonight. Please all stand. And Kathy Sun, where are you? Kathy in the back. Okay. I didn't know whether we should call one person out, but you drove this train from the beginning. So now everybody can get a big hand. Thank you. The second round of recognition, sorry, you can sit, is for the people that really give us reason for a night like this. The global frontline leadership of Search for Common Ground, a lot of whom are actually watching this in the middle of the night, their time, wherever they may be around the world in the 30 countries where we work. Some of their work you got to see before we had dinner tonight. This year, I've been somehow connected with this organization one way or the other since 1993, since I was an unpaid intern one summer when the organization had just 10 staff and one office in Washington, D.C. In all of that time, I cannot recall a year that was this challenging and difficult. When our president, Issam, opened the night, he mentioned COVID and the impact that that's had on everyone's life, not just professional but personal, dealing with healthcare, childcare, all the things that were impinging on people's lives. Every single person in the world has been touched by this. Certainly every single person in our organization has been. On top of that, in a full 1/3 of the countries where we operate over the last 18 months, there has been significant political violence, coups violently suppressed, entire governments resigning. And this became almost to a point of absurdity where I started one board meeting by putting up a picture of a volcano that was erupting right next to the city of Goma in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. And a colleague of ours had taken a picture of this volcano that was terrorizing that entire city of 700,000 people. Electricity went out for the next couple of weeks. There were tremors. People were terrified. And I literally said, what more can you throw at these people? It was an unbelievable, unbelievable year. And yet, not only is the organization resilient, we had our board meeting starting out just before this event tonight, the organization has grown this year. We've seen a commitment from our staff that's actually increased phenomenally. And it really, it gives me such a privilege, a sense of privilege. When I walk into your office, Michael, or to any of your offices or your homes and I talk to you, these are the people that I get to represent. And it is the most humbling experience that a human being could have. And so when we had, and I'll just give a couple examples very briefly, when the coup happened in Kyrgyzstan, and our director there, Kinesh, was called by the top UN official and the former president of the country, who asked him to please support the negotiation process to try to prevent that coup from leading to widespread violence in the country. When our director of our Afghanistan program, and she's with us actually tonight, Zuhra, if you could stand, please. Who, as a teenage girl, lived during the previous Taliban rule, when she has really been one of the most prominent activists and vocal advocates to stay engaged in that country. Not simply to support people leaving, and we understand the importance of that, but to think about the millions of people who are going nowhere, and to stop treating them as if they were all either victims or untouchable folks, but actually people who have agency, who can make a difference in their own communities if we continue to engage and support them. And Zora's been right on the front lines of that advocacy with our team that's still there on the ground in Afghanistan. And Mina Ayazi, where are you, Mina? Mina, who is from Afghanistan as well, and has been a real driving force in the youth peace and security advocacy that our organization has been leading, including the first bill, if it passes, it's been introduced here in the U.S. Congress, to support the Youth Peace and Security Act, to provide protection for young people in conflict zones and to support their participation in peace processes. Peace processes that involve young people last a lot longer. And one of the things we have to realize today is that we're living at a time where we have the largest cohort of young people in human history today. We talked about Afghanistan. The median age in Afghanistan is 18 years old. And Michael talked about the importance of how we educate so that people can deal with difference. We have to understand the investment that's needed at that level. And because of Mina's advocacy, we may be the first country to pass a law along those lines. And so that's the second round of people I really need to stand here and recognize, which is those people who are on the front lines of doing this work, whether it's here in the US or in Afghanistan or in Myanmar or any of the places where we operate. So I'd like one big hand, and I recognize that a lot of them are watching virtually, so I'd like them to hear you shout. So thank you. And I know you've been listening to a lot of talks. This is the last moment. The last group of people I want to thank are our supporters. And every single person in this room and watching online can count yourself as one of those as of tonight, if you didn't count yourself as that before tonight. You know, I think the point has been made very clear that conflict is inevitable, but violence is not. Violence is a choice. There's nothing inevitable about it. And somebody asked me earlier tonight, well, why did you decide to do the awards? Well, fundamentally, it's very difficult to advocate for something and to work for something if you can't even envision the possibility that it will succeed. And one of the ways that you can envision the possibility that it will succeed is to elevate and amplify examples of where it is succeeding. And so that's why we're doing these awards. And so what I would encourage you all to do, if you're not already doing it, is take some of the models that you've seen from tonight. We need to tell better stories, as JT is doing, you know, through Oslo. And if you don't know the stories to tell, stay connected with Search for Common Ground. We're churning them out every single day, literally. We'll give you plenty of stories that will reinvigorate your hope in society. Or take the example of Keith and Phoebe, who took a story that had been written indelibly in everybody's minds and they rewrote it. I love the fact that every time you see Plessy, everyone who's here sees Plessy Ferguson referenced again, you're not just going to think of the legislation that codified Jim Crow era of racial segregation in this country. You're going to also be triggered to think about the model that they're creating for a new America that's inclusive of everybody's dignity. So whether you're telling a new story, rewriting an old story, this is work that every one of us has to do wherever we live in the world. And I want to thank everybody in this room and around the world for being supporters of Search for Common Ground as we rewrite those new stories for all of our communities. So thank you. And finally, Jeremy, we've got to thank you. Speaking of youth leadership, I think Jeremy's the youngest White House correspondent in history. So more youth leaders. And thank you very much for your emceeing.
First, very important news. I've been instructed to tell you all that dessert is on the 21st floor. So as this wraps, you can head up there. Just want to leave you guys with some closing words, which is, you turn on the news today and it's easy to see why Search for Common Ground's work is so essential. From the Middle East to Middle America, conflicts abound. And there's no question that finding common ground and common purpose and learning to live with our differences without violent conflict is the urgent work of our times. But after hearing from our inspiring award recipients tonight, it is clear to me that that urgent work is being done. And that gives me hope. So it's been an honor to be with you all tonight. Thank you all so much, and good night.
Absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Keith Plessy, Phoebe Ferguson. You guys blew me away with your speech. Congratulations, first of all. And can you speak to just what this moment means and how you feel now?
Well, from a handshake to where we stand now, we took it for granted somewhat when we first met that my last name is Plessy and her last name is Ferguson. And when we met genuinely, we became friends, and we were going to just be friends. But to say that from our archivist friends, historians, authors, who talked to us and made us see the seriousness of our relationship, they brought us to this point where we formed the foundation in 2009, and the work began for us to try to tell the truth about history and just be kind to each other and just show an example. And it's been 11 years of that kind of work. The work continues, And we had no idea that we were going to get Homer Plessy a pardon. So, our work has been surrounding, recognizing these gentlemen for their fight in the early civil rights movement in the 18th century. Well, I would say 19th century, they were in the 1800s. But
Keith, he wants to know what this moment means to you.
Yeah, it does.
No, what
it
does
means all of that. It means that we come to this point because it just we had no idea that it would get this big. So to tell you the truth, it's great. It's great.
Phoebe, how do you feel?
Well, he's very moved that this happened, by the way.
You said you became friends. Clearly you have.
Yes.
I mean, the way your
Yes.
dynamic on the podium earlier and now, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, of course I'm elated that this has happened because it's changed the entire story. It's changed the dynamic and how we relate to this particular story, but this particular story is so important to the national story. And the national story of separating the races and separate and unequal. And so this gives us the possibility of how we can change the not just the dynamics, but the policies around the criminal justice system, and about, the fact that this idea that people can come together and actually make a difference. Yeah.
I'm curious to know, how did you come into contact? How did you meet?
Excuse me. We were introduced to each other by an author, Keith Weldon Medley, who wrote a book called We as Free Men, Plessy versus Ferguson. And what was unique about that book is it tells the New Orleans story of this case and every single person who was involved in getting it to the Supreme Court and why. And so he introduced us at a book signing, and our first encounter went something like this.
Well, I'm Keith Plessy, and
He said hi.
I'm Phoebe
Yeah.
Ferguson,
And
and we shook hands like so.
Right.
And Phoebe began to apologize for segregation, discrimination, everything that was wrong about separate but equal. And what I told her was that it's no longer Plessy versus Ferguson, it's Plessy and Ferguson. And from that part, I was speaking from my heart, and I didn't realize we were going to be having a foundation that would actually be named the Plessy and Ferguson Foundation.
And how did that interaction feel for you guys? I'm sure it must have been like a wave of emotions,
It was.
It definitely
I
was.
assume, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we became instant friends as a result. And like I was saying, just that would have been good enough for us. But we were surrounded by people who understood the impact of our relationship, and they helped us to form the foundation.
But I will say this too: is the immediate post of that meeting where we met each other. We both went back to our various. I went back to New York, and Keith went, to his friends, and we both said, "Hey, guess who I met today?" And
You'll
then,
never guess who I met today.
Right. But they all had the same reaction. That they said, "Oh my God, that gives me goosebumps. I can't believe that the two of you have met and become friends." Isn't that interesting? That 108 years later, we still felt like this couldn't happen?
What was it like growing up? Because each of you knew who you were and who your ancestors were and your place in that history of American history. What was it like then to then all of a sudden meet each other, and did that change you then?
Yes, it did. Now, you didn't mention that we had gumbo and bread pudding before you left, right?
I forgot to mention that.
But,
An important part.
Yeah, but it surprised a lot of my friends and my family members. And like I said, when the archivist friend of ours and the historian and author, Keith Weldon Medley, told the whole story about Phoebe's background and mine, we couldn't resist coming together. Now, I tell you what, we had a rough interruption for a minute, which was Hurricane Katrina. We met in 2004, and Hurricane Katrina interrupted any news about our meeting. So when we came back to New Orleans, because I had to leave myself. I went to Memphis, Phoebe, you were in New York. We came back to New Orleans to help rebuild. And at the time I was in Memphis, I didn't want to come back, tell you the truth. I didn't want to come back to New Orleans. But when I got back and I got together with Phoebe, it encouraged me to stay. And I'm glad I did, because if I would have went to Memphis, that would have been a big mistake. We never would be at this point.
And you guys call yourselves memory preservationists, is that right? Preservationists. Yeah. What would you say to people right now in the U.S. that really don't want to look back at our history, that are maybe afraid of what they might uncover? What do you have to say about history and looking back?
Well, and as a result of what happened tonight, I can tell you that people look back at history and they refer to it as reflecting. But if you don't reflect on history and make corrections, reflection without correction is like glancing over your shoulder at history. And in our instance of working together, we found that when we unearthed the facts about history, that no matter how embarrassing it is, you have to learn how to embrace your history and face it. But if you don't work on solutions to it, you're just looking back and not really focusing on it.
I can't remember the question now. It's like
It's okay. It's okay.
Do you guys look at? Can you look at what you've accomplished together, your foundation? What do you look at around this country today and see where there's room for more growth, for more achievement, for no problem, and for more finding of common ground?
Well, like Phoebe was saying, it's kind of like a new chapter now that we've gotten a pardon for Homer Plessy, because what it can do to affect today's ways that laws are looked at. There are so many laws that are still in the books that should be removed, like the one that convicted Homer Plessy. A lot of laws enforce and promote discrimination. So any discriminatory laws that are going to be introduced into our society should be rejected automatically. They should never become law, because the law that convicted Homer Plessy was actually a crime.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations once again on the award. You guys mentioned in your speech that this was all a surprise to you just a few days ago. I didn't know I'd be meeting the two of you until about yesterday. This is absolutely incredible. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your insight and your experience.
And we
and
actually
thank you for the work
have
that you do.
the physical awards here
The
for you
hardware is
guys. So we wanted this to present this to you. This is for Phoebe. Phoebe, sorry about that.
That's okay.
That's right.
And
we
here you
didn't name
go,
on it.
Keith. Congratulations, guys. Really, congratulations.
Well,
so much. We are so grateful to be here with you.
Of course. We're grateful that you guys are here.
This is a team effort. Without our foundation, we would not be where we are. And without the help of the DA's office in New Orleans and the Civil Rights Division, we would not have a pardon for Homer Plessy.
Yeah. Takes a village, takes a village.
2021
Thank you so much.
Common Ground Award recipients, Phoebe Ferguson and Mr. Plessy. I swear to God, I've been so thrilled to meet you two, and this has been incredible. Thank you for taking some time.
Pleasure's all ours.
Thank you so much.
We're about to wrap up the virtual experience of the 2021 Common Ground Awards, except let's talk to
Shamal Idris, guys. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Find some room on the mantle for that.
You have to stay together, like
Okay.
us.
Yeah. Keith, thank you so much. Let's get the man a mic here.
All right. Hello, Shamal.
Hi. Hello.
We did it.
Yeah, good night. Good night. Maybe there are fireworks going off outside. They have nothing to do with us, but I think we'll claim them.
Oh, you didn't?
Yeah, I'll just pretend that.
They're official
Oh,
Common
it's
Ground
great, though.
Awards fireworks outside right now.
Fantastic. Just a couple words about tonight.
Is incredibly uplifting, and it happens every year when we do this. It kind of rejuvenates your faith in humanity and your faith in what's possible, and it's a heck of a lot of fun. Honestly, and so I just feel great. And I think for me, for people who are kind of watching who couldn't be with us tonight, a lot of the people who are doing that are team members from all around the world, people living on the front lines of really devastating conflict. And so for them in particular, while we greatly miss having you here with us, your spirit is 100% present. And this event is about honoring you as much as anyone else. So thank you very much for everything that you do.
But there's still work to be done, right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
It's great to recognize what's been done, but there's a whole lot more to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, we organized this event. This is just 1 month after we actually launched our newest program, which is Common Ground USA. And we're here in the U.S., and people are much more recognizing now than maybe they have in decades the importance of doing this work here in the U.S., not just elsewhere around the world. So there's a lot to be done here, and there's a lot to be done everywhere that we're working, and in many places where we're not yet. So absolutely, and we'll keep at it.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're in our chat, if you want to give to Search and give to the mission that we're going to be doing, it's there in the chat, the link if you'd like to give. And donate to Search. Yeah.
That's absolutely. And we rely on the support of people like you all to make a big difference. We actually leverage every dollar that we get from individuals like you all to more than $10 from some of the bigger institutional donors, the governments, the UN agencies, and others that support us. So that dollar oftentimes is a lot harder for us to raise than the institutional money, but it leverages everything else. So if you're in a position to give, even a small amount, it'll make a huge difference for us.
Yeah.
And we can see the results of what it does, even just a little bit. I mean, look at the impact it has, right? All over the world.
Absolutely. So, yeah, great night. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome.
Support Search for Common Ground.
All right.
Stay in touch, and thank you all.
We'll let you get back to the dessert reception, the post party. Yeah.
Thank you.
And we'll let you get back to sleep or to go eat or do anything. Thank
Seriously.
you so much for joining us, everybody, from home, to our staff, our supporters, everybody. We're so thankful.
We appreciate it. And this is good night from Glass House Chelsea in Midtown Manhattan, New York City. This has been the 2021 virtual experience of the Common Ground Awards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.